ever speak to me like that again, better be wearing a cup.
Baby steps.
One break, I'm in love.
Let's everybody take your positions, please. Here we go. 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, rolling. Dave!
And
Dave!
Unchained.
welcome to Dave and Dave Unchained, a Van Halen podcast. I'm Dave.
And I'm Dave.
And we are at the first episode of the year, Dave, episode number 85. We are at the beginning of 2023, our first episode of the year. What do you think, Dave?
Wow, it's like amazing. We've made it another year, up to 85 already. Like, it's crazy, man.
It's really
crazy.
wild. We're really getting up there in age. It's unbelievable. We
I know,
started
I
this
know.
podcast, we were 46 years old. Can you believe
Your
that?
math is better than ever. If only Sam's was as good.
That's right. And speaking of Sam, we're going to get right into him with Van Halen news.
Van Halen.
News! Well, Sam is always, oh my God, he doesn't stop, this guy. He says he's not doing anything and he's taking the year off, but of course he's out there doing press, and we're starting off Van Halen news with a bunch of Sam's comments, and he did a new interview with Growth TV. In talking about his willingness to participate in a Van Halen reunion, he said, "Oh, hell yes. I would be involved, and I would insist that Dave come along. He's not so friendly." I'm just going to pause there for a minute.
I can't even get myself for you to get through the sentence without giggling.
Well, let me explain why. Because this statement is amazing. First of all, he says, "Oh, hell yes." Now he's all in, right? Now he's all in. I would be involved, and I would insist that Dave come along, as if he's running it. That's hysterical. I mean, this guy's unreal.
Right. Like, oh, you know what, Sam? We're just going to invite you and not invite Dave. Like, that's even an option. I mean, I guess it could be if, like, Dave totally is impossible to deal with or doesn't want to do it or whatever. But he makes it sound like, you know, he's pulling the strings and is part of the inner sanctum of the Van Halen think tank. And
Which
it's
is-
like,
yeah.
dude, no.
No, he's amazing. He's talking as if Ed Loeffler is still the manager, and him and Ed Loeffler are running the show. It's hysterical.
Right. Yes.
Unbelievable.
Yes.
And he says here, talking about Dave, he doesn't play well with others, and never has and never will. But if he didn't want to do it, then of course, I can always sing those songs. Those songs are easy. I'd sing those songs lying on my back, smoking a cigarette, even though I don't smoke. I mean, first of all, that's demeaning. I mean, it really is. Like, almost like, yeah, you know what? You want me to do your songs? I'll do your songs. Now, all of a sudden, he wants to do the Dave catalog. This
Oh,
guy's
yeah, because
hysterical.
he almost never did them the first time around. And now, all of a sudden, he's willing to do them?
It's hysterical. Oh,
It's
don't worry.
unbelievable,
We don't even
this
need
guy.
to invite Dave. I got those songs. I can do those songs at two hands tied behind my back with a gag in my mouth. I mean, it's hysterical. And it's also demeaning to Dave, like his songs are less than. It's not cool. And then he wonders why he's not getting a call. That's why he's got to have Mike
Right.
do his bidding, or he has to have Joe Satriani do his bidding. I mean, for Christ's sake, Al and Dave were looking to get an extra bass player to put in there with Jason Newsted instead of calling Mike, because they know Mike can't go without being attached to Sam. I mean, it's hysterical. This guy's not getting
Oh,
the
well,
hint.
wait, but didn't Sam say something to that effect, too, about Mike?
Yeah, well, he comes here now. He says, that would be awesome. I would say that if Alex and Mike are in, Mike and I are really tight. Alex is a little quirky. I don't know what he really wants to do, which is like, dude, this is not your band. Where are you even getting off with this? Then he goes, Wolfie is the guy on guitar, but I don't think Wolfie wants to do it. I don't communicate with Wolfie that much. I'm not really that close to Wolfie anymore since I'm not in the band. When he was little, I was really close to Wolfie. Now he was close to Wolfie? Wasn't Wolfie like an infant when he was in the band?
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, unless he's thinking about the 2004 tour.
Yeah, maybe. Then he says here, the coolest thing he ever did was say, no, I'm not going to try to fill my dad's shoes. I'm going to go out and be Wolfie. He's got his dad's heart and he's doing the right thing. So, I mean, it's nice that he's nodding to Wolfie, but but I just think that this guy has got massive balls. To be honest with you, it seems like he's just going for broke because he knows nothing's gonna happen. So he'll just throw any freaking arrow or stone he can in order to get a reaction. That's what it seems like. I don't know. What do you think?
I don't think you're wrong in that he's just throwing anything against the wall to see if he can be part of it. But I also think that he genuinely believes that his time in the band is on equal footing with Dave's time in the band. And he is as equal as a member as Dave, and the band with him is on equal footing as the band with Dave. And he will never believe anything less than that, and he will never let anyone else think that either. I think that's part of it, and I'm exaggerating here, but I think he goes in there and he's like, When It's Love is just as much of an important and groundbreaking Van Halen song as Unchained. And it's like, dude. I know. I just made that up completely.
No, I understand where you're coming from.
But that's his attitude.
No, I know. But you know what I think it is, Dave? And you tell me if I'm in the right direction here. They made a boatload of money with Sam. So it's almost like all those years of working in Van Halen, and don't get me wrong, they did well with Dave. But if you think about the times that Sam came in, mid-80s to mid-90s, it was high money time. And they were cashing the hell in on Van Halen's reputation that has been built. They were riding the wave all the way to the beach. Sam in Van Halen made a boatload of money for the band. Him and Ed Loeffler and them running. So I'm wondering if he's equating that success to musical success. So I think because they made so much money with that era, the Van Hagar era, I think he equates it as being just as good as Dave. But we're looking at it from a musical standpoint. Like I think you said another time, Ed made his mark on the scene by 1984. Like, his mark was so solidly made with 6 legendary albums, and he was already heralded for being one of the most innovative guitarists of all time, and the band itself was already heralded as the top of the hard rock genre. So they had really come together and gelled and really conquered. I mean, to have your first album and your last album, in terms of the first Roth era, be the biggest ones, I mean, it just kind of bookended that whole experience and really showed how big this band was. And, Sam came in when the band was already on the top suite with VIP treatment. He was the second husband who walked in after the wife won all the money in the divorce. It's just unbelievable. And don't get me wrong, I think him and Ed Loeffler came in and, ran the ship and rightfully did well by them, I think, for sure. And I think he made great music with them and everything. I'm not doubting any of that. But the thing is that I think he's equating that to musical prowess. You know what I'm saying? What do you think?
I think you might be onto something there. I mean, there's no denying that they sold a boatload of albums.
Plenty, yeah.
And the songs were popular and all that. Like, I would never take that away from them. But I just think that in terms of what the band has left behind, like you pointed out, like we said before, I think Van Halen, made their mark when Dave was in the band.
Right.
I'm not saying what they did with Sam was crap.
No.
I have said that about some things sometimes. But, it wasn't new. It wasn't groundbreaking anymore. Van Halen with Dave was a thing. It was a new thing. With Sam, they were still a great band, but like you said, they were an established band by that time.
Oh, yeah,
It's just funny to hear Sam talk about this like he has a say in the matter. Yeah. That's the best part.
He has that kind of chip a little bit. The bottom line is when Mike is standing by your side and Dave and Alex hide away and Ed's no longer here and Gary's in Extreme, who's going to contest him? So that's the thing, is he realizes, I might just step up to the mic. Dave's not saying anything. Alex not saying anything. Ed's not here. Wolfie doesn't give a crap. He's on his own solo trip. Mike's right here by my side, and, Gary's off doing Extreme. I am Van Halen. Let's remember something. When Ed got sick, Dave came out and started saying, I'm Van Halen. You want Van Halen? I'm going to be Van Halen going forward. Remember that? That's when we saw him.
Oh, yeah. Yep.
Right, when we saw him on the Vegas thing, when he was doing press for that, which was like late 2019, Ed's not answering the call this time. Now, I don't think he thought Ed was going to die, but at the same time, he was like, you want old Van Halen? You come to me. I'm going to be old Van Halen from now on. And he got that band together, and they got that whole show together. Now, of course, the pandemic happened, everything unraveled, and then Dave ended up having his own health issues, of which we don't know what they are, but he admitted he has health issues. So, that's why I think a lot of the Van Halen redos he's putting out there, I think he, again, staking claim to the Van Halen legacy. Remember, I'm Diamond Dave, I'm the face of Van Halen, all this kinds of stuff. So, this stuff is weird. On top of this, Sammy came out with a documentary called Sammy Hagar's Paradise. Now, this is weird. TMZ is presenting the documentary, and it's airing on Fox Nation app. I didn't understand that combo at all. Neither TMZ or Fox Nation have anything to do with music. Why it's on that app and why TMZ is presenting it is beyond me.
The whole thing sounds sketchy.
It's just odd. I mean, it's creepy. I mean, it's to the point where, I didn't want to download the Fox. You have to sign up for Fox Nation to watch the goddamn thing, and I wasn't about to do that. Anyway, it's streaming on there now. It's like an hour long. Gives you access to his 75th birthday bash in Cabo this past fall, and he's sharing his true story about his whole legendary ride in the music industry. And Hagar said, I've been trying to get something like this done about my birthday bash since the beginning, and I finally got it done right, and the fans are in it. Look for yourselves. It's awesome. So he was out there promoting that, and he was even on Fox News promoting that, and it was kind of strange, but he was on there with Neil Cavuto, and he said, I've had so many dreams that I've never dreamt come true. Of course, all I really dreamt about was someday being a rock star, rich and famous guy, and being able to take care of my mother and my family as well, have a beautiful home, beautiful cars, that was it. A gold record maybe on the wall. My gut is really what guides me. If I feel something right, I do it. If I don't do it. I'm not interested in doing things for money, and I think that's part of the success. I'm passionate about what I choose to do with my time, especially at my age now. I'm going, how much time do I have left to live? I wrote a song called Father Time on my latest record, Crazy Times, and it's about that. How much time do I have left? I need to do things that are important to me now. I'm not success, money, fame, fortune driven. Now I'm driven by things I've never done that I want to do, which is interesting. He came out and said that. He admitted in an interview with Fox Nation, he says, I don't think I would have been as legendary an artist as I am today without the Van Halen thing. That was the peak of my musical career. And he says joining the band was life-changing, and said his songwriting compatibility with the late guitarist Eddie Van Halen was magical. So obviously, he's looking to look back. He's constantly looking to, don't forget, remember me, I was in Van Halen, that kind of thing. So, obviously...
Well, I'm glad he finally saw the light and realized what all of us have been saying for years, which is if it wasn't for you being in Van Halen, you would have been, another 80s singer, guitarist, level B, maybe even C performer. I mean, yeah, you hit the big time with Van Halen, but the way he used to talk, or he still talks now, is, back in 84, before I joined Van Halen, we were all playing arenas, And it's like, Sam, I'm not taking away from the fact you played an arena, but there's no way you were at the same level as Van Halen.
I mean, that's hysterical. I mean,
that's where his head is. So
I know.
I'm glad he finally came around and is seeing what we've all seen already for years.
We interrupt this program to bring you a special report.
Hey guys, wanted to let you know about another piece of breaking news. So it turns out that Sammy made a comment on his Van Hagar / Other Half Instagram page. He posted up a performance of Van Halen performing Amsterdam on the Jon Stewart Show back in 1995. He was doing this in celebration of the 28th anniversary of Balance. In the comments section, one fan posted, I wish this album, along along with OU812 and 5150 would get remastered. And Sammy responded, all that is coming soon. They started with the live album. It's coming out first, and then they are going to remaster everything. No date as to when that's due to come out. Actually pretty strange that they're starting with the live album, which is live right here, right now, which came out in 1993. Perhaps they're going to be doing that as a celebration for the 30th anniversary. Who knows? Stay tuned.
We return you now to your regularly scheduled program.
Now, Wolfgang Van Halen, he did an interview recently with Classic Rock. They talked about the Taylor Hawkins tribute, and they said, what was it like being part of such an event? And he said, it was an honor to participate. Taylor was one of my biggest drum inspirations when it comes to drumming. Drums are my first instrument. And they asked him how he knew Taylor, and he said he came to a Van Halen show in 2012. My dad and I spoke to Taylor for almost 2 hours, and he was the sweetest guy. The news of his passing really broke me. Getting a call from Dave Grohl, another inspiration of mine, to play the shows was a real shock. So that's really cool. And he also said, practically everything I do with Mammoth is inspired by Dave and the Foos. He also said that in the aftermath of Taylor's passing, he says, I know from the experience with my pop, I'll never be okay. The wounds heal around it, but it's always kind of there. And he said that Dave's been through so much, I hope he can figure out a way to be okay, but it's not easy. Talking about how he knows about Lost. And they talked about his actual performance, where he performed Panama and Hot for Teacher at the LA tribute, and then he played On Fire and Panama at the London tribute. So he says Justin is a sweetheart in terms of Justin Hawkins, the vocalist. He said, Justin Hawkins is a sweetheart. He's always been one of my favorite singers, and we really bonded. And Josh Freese, the drummer, is one of the best ever. So we had a really good time doing that. And then he said that some people were saying he played it with eerie accuracy, which is interesting. He said some people took it really far and said I didn't actually do it at all. So, of course, you know, Wolf being sensitive to the internet rumors and stuff like, he said there were some crazy reports that he was miming it. He said, I'll even take that as even more of a compliment. You line up the solos, and there are many times when I'm not even playing what's on the original record. Preparing for those shows was really tough because it forced me to go back and look through those songs. I still wasn't completely comfortable in doing that, emotionally speaking, so it took a lot to do it. When they asked him about the Van Halen tribute to Ed going forward, is there any potential, blah, blah, blah. And so he says, listen, I think I already did it with Taylor. I feel closure because my part of the show was a tribute to my father. And when it comes to Van Halen and entities surrounding the band, it's unfortunate. Certainly compared to the Foo Fighters, who have their shit together with interpersonal relationships. I don't know what it is with some bands, but certain personalities just can't get over themselves to work collectively for one purpose. That's been the curse of Van Halen for its entire career. So my playing at Taylor's shows delivered that catharsis without the stresses of dealing with the Van Halen camp and the players involved. Their camp is very dysfunctional. Everyone. Hell, it was difficult to make plans even when the band was active. So boy, is he sharp-tongued there. He's not mincing words. They said, no, not at all.
Not at all.
This is even, and then he wraps up with this. They asked him, David Lee Roth might be immovable, but Sammy Hagar told Rolling Stone that he would love to play those songs again. And then Wolf says, he said that, but he also said he wouldn't. Sammy said two different things. No, I feel that I've said my piece, and if the Taylor concerts are all that happens, then I'm happy with that. So it seems pretty clear that Wolf is like, you know what? Enough's enough. I'm not dipping my toe with those guys. Forget it. But I also think this is just conjecture and my own feelings. I wonder what's going on between him and Al.
Yeah.
I have a feeling that Al was about to run with something and he lost his shit. I can't speak for him. I don't know anything. From reading all these pieces, the way Al was meeting with Joe Satriani, they got him a ton of Eddie's gear, not his personal gear, but his equipment from his company. And Joe was learning the songs, and they got that offer to open at that big Central Park show, and then they were getting Jason Newsted on bass. Obviously, they were cooking up something, and that got unplugged fast. And everything said, oh, issues with the family. The only issue is between Al and him. So, I don't know. What do you think, Dave?
Well, I don't know. I wonder, would Al not do anything because Wolf didn't like it? First of all, I don't think Wolf has that kind of power play in the band. And from other things we've heard, Al can be a really stubborn guy, and he's going to do whatever he wants to do.
Well, let's be honest. Joe said he was preparing for a tour. This was not some one-night charity event. He said he was preparing for a tour. So,
well, Joe wasn't preparing for a tour.
No, Joe said in his interview, the last Van Halen...
Joe said there was going to be a tour, but it's not like he was...
No.
You know,
they didn't have a tour booked. They didn't have a tour booked. He was preparing to go out on a tour. Nothing was booked. That was the project that he was hired to do. This wasn't some one weekend in L.A. as a tribute to Eddie and everything goes to charity type of thing. This was a tour. It's obviously something happened. So it's very clear. Also, Wolf talked about his upcoming new album, which is the second Mammoth WVH album. And in an interview with Overdrive, he said people were criticizing him, why isn't he using his band, and calling him too cheap to hire other musicians. And he said, I need to go home and do the vocals and guitar solos. This is when I guess he was in Europe. He says, I'm recording this album totally on my own like I did the debut. I know it may come across as selfish, but that's just the way it works for me. I like to completely immerse myself in the music, all aspects of it. I think a lot of people have tried to turn it into something else, saying things like, oh, it's because he doesn't want to pay other musicians. It's not that at all. It's just something for me, a sacred experience for me. It's my project and an artistic outlet for me and my mental well-being. I suppose it's kind of like a Nine Inch Nails thing. I'm not comparing myself to Trent Reznor. It's more the interesting duality to this approach, which is so much fun and deeply satisfying. So he's being very honest about it. That's what he likes to do. He said he's halfway through the process, but he says in January, this month that we're in now, which is going to be ending very soon, I'm going to finish it and have it ready to be released this year. So it should be exciting that this is coming out.
I'm psyched to hear new music from him. And yeah, I totally get where he's coming from. That's just the way he wants to do it.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
And really, you think about it, like not too many people can do that. He's really very gifted.
Oh, yeah.
That he can play all those instruments and not need any help and do it well. It's not like he's half-assing it. I give the guy a lot of credit for doing that. I mean, who else do you know that can do that? It was like Prince.
Yeah.
Right? Paul McCartney.
Right.
You know, I'm sure there's a few others who I can't think of at the moment, but it's not a long list. I'm just happy he's out there, he's doing new music, and I'm looking forward to hearing it.
Yeah, me too. And he also said that distance is still hard to play. He said it's tough every time I play it, but you have to separate yourself from that because it's somebody's first time seeing it every night, so you want to make sure you do it the best you can. Sometimes it's a little more difficult than others, but overall, I think it's always going to be a thing that I need to prepare before I do it well. He described it as an honor to discover some of the comments about distance from other fans. He says that they feel, close to it and that they understand the meaning behind it, and they share that feeling. It's a very crazy feeling, he said. I'm very, very thankful for even being around that sort of vibe. And he says that things are cool with his band. We're one big happy family, and they're amazing dudes. So he's very happy with his band. He's happy with the progress of his album. Everybody should just support him because, that's the kind of Van Halen music out there. And you know what? Ed told us years ago. He said it. He said, this kid is dangerous. He says he is doing things that I haven't done. And he was right. He's doing an entire album. And Ed was probably like, wait a minute. You don't have to deal with a bass player? You don't have to deal with a lead singer? Holy shit, what the hell I've been doing my whole life? So he probably is envious of it and probably was totally blown away and proud as well. So that's very cool.
We interrupt this program to bring you a special report.
Hey guys, unexpectedly, David Lee Roth dropped another single, a cover of Mustang Sally. This came out of nowhere, but it doesn't appear to be part of the Henson sessions from 2022. This seems like an older track he might have done at Henson, as we all know that Dave has done a whole boatload of covers that he has kind of stored away in his archives. Hopefully we'll see more of those coming out, but it seems like we're getting covers now. We're getting Van Halen covers. We're getting songs from the California sessions. Either way, it's Diamond Dave. Here's a clip of Mustang Sally.
Mustang Sally. All right. Think you better slow your Mustang down. All right. What I say. Mustang
now to your regularly scheduled program.
Also, another gem came out, Dave. Another gem. So, as we know, since Eddie's passing, gems have fallen out of the closet here and there about recordings that we didn't know about. And another one came out. Now, this one is from a concert that took place at Pepperdine University's Firehouse Fieldhouse in Malibu, California. And it was taking place on May 12th, 1985. And it was a fundraiser for the Malibu Emergency Room, known as MER. And what happened was Eddie played at this benefit with none other than Cheech Marin, who is half of Cheech and Chong. And he came out there and he played a 4-song set with Cheech, playing Marvin Gaye's Ain't That Peculiar, Cheech's song Mexican Americans and Born in East LA, and then, of course, a cover of the Troggs' Wild Thing. Here's a clip. So this was interesting, huh? Who the hell ever thought that existed? What did you make of that?
When I first read that, I was like, wait, what? This was like around the time that Ed was putting in some guest appearances around town.
Yes.
So this was just one of the more offbeat ones, I guess, because it involved Cheech. Who knew these guys were rubbing elbows with each other?
Amazing. Speaking of fundraisers, Michael Anthony, former bassist of Van Halen, current bassist of The Circle, will perform a fundraiser concert benefiting the Save the Heartbeat Foundation, and that is going to take place March 25th at the Tiki Bar at Costa Mesa, California. And Save the Heartbeat is a nonprofit organization that benefits those that are affected by congenital heart disease. Now, unfortunately, in April 2017, Michael lost his 2-week-old grandson, Rex Becerra, who was the son of his eldest daughter, Alicia. He died of the heart disease earlier that month, and Michael still, I know he does that walk every year, and now he's doing this benefit concert, Dave. What did you make of that? Mike being the good guy that we know he is, always continuing, right?
Absolutely. Guy's got a big heart, and I think it's really cool that he's willing to help a hand and raise some money and raise some awareness for the group.
What do you think he's going to do? Do you think he's going to do Van Halen songs or a mix of covers or what?
I think he's going to do old school Van Halen songs. Remember, he had like that solo thing he was opening up for Sammy with, the Michael Anthony Express or whatever it was.
Yeah.
I think that he's going to do a bunch of Van Halen songs from the 6-pack. That's my guess.
Who do you think's going to play with him?
I think he's going to get The Circle, or I think he's going to get Vic on guitar.
Uh-huh.
And I don't know who's going to get drums. I mean, maybe Jason Bonham if he's around.
Right.
Well, that guy keeps himself busy when he's not with the band.
Right.
So I don't know who he's going to get as a drummer. Maybe Sam's old drummer from Sammy and the Wabos.
Oh, David Lauser?
Yeah, because they also played together in Sam's side band, Los Tres Gusanos.
Right,
so
that's right.
I don't know. It'll be interesting to see what he does and who he does it with.
Yeah, I can't wait to hear about that. Now, another thing surfaced, another gem hit YouTube. It's Van Halen from 1980. Some 8mm clips, which mainly focused on Roth, a little bit of Ed, showcasing the band on the Women and Children First tour. And there's clips of Running with the Devil, Loss of Control, and The Cradle Will Rock, Take Your Whiskey Home, Dance the Night Away. And then there's also a clip of Eddie Van Halen solo. That showcases kind of the upbeat, fun Van Halen energy. Roth looks like an action figure up there, moving around the way he did. It's just unbelievable. It's amazing he could still walk with the way he was jumping around. Ed was playing a shark guitar, Dave, with the black and white stripes. They also showed clips of Women in Love, Feel Your Love Tonight. David Lee Roth looks like the Eat 'em and Smile era with the bangs a little bit, spandex pants, loose cut-up tops. So here's a little clip. You want to hear it? So obviously the clip is not as good as the visual. Obviously the visual is the whole thing. It's got that real old school 8mm film. But this is another gem. Came falling out of the closet. What do you make of that?
Yeah, I'm telling you, we're all salivating like dogs right before dinner.
It's incredible.
It's great stuff that they're finding and putting out there and restoring and syncing to better audio if it's out there. Just really, really cool stuff.
Very cool. Another interesting story, Dave, surfaced. Listen to this. So Steve Vai had a really wild thing happen to him. So he has been missing a guitar for 36 and a half years that was custom made by his friend Joe DeSpagani. And it was known as the Swiss cheese guitar because it had like little holes in it like Swiss cheese. And it finally got returned to him. Now listen to this. This guitar was custom built for him by his friend Joe, who was one of his best friends growing up, and he made him some of the wildest guitars he ever laid his fingers on, such as the Flame guitar, the Lightning Bolt guitar, and this Swiss cheese guitar, which made a very incredible appearance in the Yankee Rose video with David Lee Roth. And he was planning on touring with it on the Eat 'em and Smile tour, but this guitar, along with 3 others, got stolen in Pasadena at Perkins Palace during rehearsals for the Eat 'em and Smile tour. And it's the first guitar to have gotten his famous monkey grip handle on the guitar that Joe specially made for him. Now listen to this. So funny. The guitar was discovered by this young man, Ivan Gonzalez Acosta, in the attic of his grandparents' home in Tijuana, Mexico. The people that lived in his grandparents' house before them purchased the guitar somewhere along the way, and it just stuck up in the attic, only to be discovered recently when they were reorganizing things. And when Ivan discovered this guitar, he posted some images online, and they came on the radar of Vai's friend Mike Mesker. Mike apparently is the authority on the history and specifics of all Steve's guitars. And Mike started reaching out to Ivan, and after some time was able to arrange a drop-off where Ivan met with Mike and Doug MacArthur and Steve Vai. Now, Steve got the guitar back. He said the condition of the guitar is just the way he put it in the case. It hasn't been played for 36 years. He says the colors are still vibrant and the neck is in great shape. So, what do you make of that story? Wow, that's crazy.
That is amazing.
It's unbelievable.
He found a guitar that meant so much to him.
Yeah.
And was so important to him. Did I hear you right? It was in an attic in Tijuana?
Yes.
Is that right?
That is crazy,
I mean, that's
right?
just incredible that someone saw that guitar and thought it was something important. Or I don't know, maybe there was a note attached to it. If I die, call Steve Vai. I mean, I don't know what happened there, right? I mean, I can only imagine the joy on Steve's face when he got that guitar. I feel like that's happened recently to somebody else. I can't remember who now, but somebody else had lost a guitar. They thought to time forever. Oh, you know who it was? It was, what's his name? The guitarist for Bachman Turner Overdrive.
Oh, yeah? Randy Bachman?
Randy Bachman. Randy Bachman, I think he had lost the guitar for years and somebody else had found it. Like he was at the point he put out feelers and he's like, look, I just want the guitar. No questions asked.
Yeah.
And he got it. I think it was from someone in Japan had their hands on
That's
it.
amazing.
So,
when that happens,
yeah.
That's amazing. And you know what? It's really sad because Steve cherished this guitar, especially because his buddy Joe, who has since passed on, made it for him, handmade it for him. So it had a real personal significance to him. So congratulations to Steve. Thank you to Ivan for finding that guitar. And if you guys want to check it out, if you watch the Yankee Rose video, it's very easy to point out because it's got all kinds of holes in it. That's why they call it the Swiss cheese guitar, but very, very cool. And that's an interesting story. Another interesting story is there is this beer company called the New England Brewing Company, and they are located in Woodbridge, Connecticut. Dave, is that near you?
probably probably about half an hour, 45 minutes away, I think.
Wow, well, let me tell you something. You better get in your little car there and drive over there because they are selling a very special Van Halen beer, and it's called, get this, David Lee Roth. Now, it's not spelled the way Dave spells his name. It's spelled David Lee, meaning David L-Y, kind of like likely, David L-Y as one word, Roth. And it is known as an imperial stout, which is loaded with toasted coconut and almonds, vanilla, and cocoa nibs. And it's a 11.5 alcohol percentage. And they are located, like I said, in Woodbridge, Connecticut. They sell it in the tap room. 7-ounce draft for $5, a 12-ounce snifter for $9, a 4-pack of 12-ounce cans to go, $18, and there's also growlers available, but they're currently sold out. If you want to check out the beer, it's really cool looking because they designed the label off of Van Halen's 1984 album, which looks like a devil instead of the kid, and it's really cool. It's the NewEnglandBrewing.com. NewEnglandBrewing.com. So check that out. David Lee Roth, Imperial Stout. Dave, what do you make of that?
Wow, I'm going to have to take a road trip for sure. I have to include my now ever-expanding beer can collection of anything related to Van Halen.
That's right. Now, speaking of David Lee Roth, boy, did we get a shocker with this one. So now listen to this. This is another little Van Halen gem that I'm sure all you guys would enjoy. We got a bunch of special gems in here that we want to share with you guys. So everybody remembers the famous Van Halen video, Hot for Teacher, right? And at the end of the video, it says where each band member ended up. Ed was in the mental institution. Al became a gynecologist. Michael was a sumo wrestler. And what was Dave doing, right? He was America's favorite TV game show host. Well, interesting enough, Dave made a comment, not recently, but I found this little gem and I thought I'd share it with you. He says, if you look at the video and you look carefully to his right pant leg, there's a massive wet spot on his jeans. And this is what Dave said. That is a piss stain down my leg. We were working so hard, I didn't have time to take a piss, literally. So I got a little on my leg. I'm a slob. Take a look the next time you see the video through. I guarantee you'll never be able to watch that video again without that piss stain sticking out a mile. So I went back, watched the video, and holy shit, he has a massive piss stain on his leg. What do you make of that, Dave?
We'll never be able to unwatch that again.
Can you imagine? Isn't that crazy?
That is crazy.
Like how? I mean, wow. You don't have 2 seconds.
But I wonder if that's really the story, or he was so drunk and or high that he didn't even know that he was peeing in his pants.
Wow.
And the only reason I bring that up is because I just recently seen A Star is Born.
I remember that.
Right? Where that scene happens.
Oh, yeah.
And I was like, is that really the story of what was going on? I don't know. But either way.
Could be.
Yeah, it's just so hard to believe they kept that in.
Well, exactly. Or someone would be like, can we get Dave to change his pants? Guys, It is noticeable. Like, it is clear as fucking day. So it's amazing. I guess you're kind of more watching, and it happens quickly, but at the same time, I don't know. But wow, good for Dave for being honest about it. That's incredible. Also wanted to let you know that the kid who played Eddie in that Hot for Teacher video, he was selling his stuff from the video, the scaled-down, non-playing version of Eddie's black and white and red striped guitar, which was used by child actor Brian Hitchcock. And it's a prop guitar featuring a Kramer headstock, a black scratch plate, single volume control. The body is signed in black Sharpie by Eddie Van Halen and thanks Brian on it. It's in a case with VH production labels, and the guitar is accompanied by young Eddie's 3-piece suit outfit from the video, comprising of the white cotton No Bozos t-shirt, as well as a pair of Sergio Valente torn jeans and an Ole Cassini denim vest. He went and he put it up for auction, which is interesting. I think it went for something like $50K, I think. Isn't that wild? Wow, huh? That's crazy.
Yeah.
It wasn't even Eddie's, but that's pretty wild. Now, also wanted to share with you, or I told you some gems, right? So I came upon this. This is just so funny. I thought you guys would get a kick out of it. So I got a copy of the bus rules on the Van Halen tour bus from '78. Listen to this. There's 9 rules. I can imagine they were written by Noel. It says here, number 1, no girls under 18 on the bus, whether moving or not. ID will be required and checked. Number 2, lock the bus when leaving, even when our people are on. Mr. Policeman can enter. Number 3, do not leave any illegal substances lying around. Not that anybody has any. Number 4, absolutely no unattended guests to be left on the bus alone. Number 5, be on time or you will find the bus gone. Number 6, no shitting in the bus. Number 7, put shoulder bags in appropriate areas, not in the lounge. Number 8, report any damage done immediately to the bus driver or bus monitor. The sooner you tell someone, the sooner it gets fixed. And number 9, no sleeping in the lounge. Pretty strict for a rock band, if you ask me, huh? What do you think?
Yeah, I almost wonder if those were the published rules.
Oh.
And, how much are they enforced?
Oh, yeah, that's true. Yeah, that's very true. Absolutely. Well, also wanted to let you guys know that Rolling Stone came out with their top 200 greatest singers of all time. And, of course, Sam, Dave, or Gary are not on any of those.
I'm just going to sit back, going to light a cigar, and I'm going to smoke it while I just watch you get angry.
I'm not going to get crazy, but I just want to let you know this is kind of incredible because the top 10, starting with number 1, Aretha Franklin, Whitney Houston, number 2, number 3, Sam Cooke, number 4, Billie Holiday, number 5, Mariah Carey, number 6, Ray Charles, number 7, Stevie Wonder, number 8, Beyonce, that's questionable, number 9, Otis Redding, and number 10, Al Green. Just wanted to give you guys a little heads up who landed where. John Lennon landed at 12, Paul McCartney at 26, Freddie Mercury at 14. Fucking crime on that. How this guy got in here is beyond me. Number 15, Bob Dylan. Now, Bob Dylan is one of the all-time greatest songwriters. Singer? Not so much.
I agree. And the fact he's even so high up on the list, it's like...
Oh, please. Wait till you hear some of these. It's just unbelievable. Number 16, Prince. Number 17, Elvis. Number 19, Frank Sinatra. Number 32, David Bowie. Number 34, Tom York of Radiohead. Number 36, Kurt Cobain of Nirvana. Number 43, Ariana fucking Grande. Okay, I don't think so. They put Ariana Grande ahead of James Brown, who's at 44, Rod Stewart at 49, Mick Jagger at 52, Tina Turner of 55, Lady Gaga at number 58, and Dave, your favorite at number 60, Kate Bush. I know you're a big Bush fan.
Oy.
And have been for many years.
Now, before you go on your list, didn't Rolling Stone have a clarifying statement that this wasn't strictly based on vocal ability and there was a little more to it?
Like frontmen type of thing?
Well,
Front
not
person?
even like frontmen, but like there's a reason that some of these people are on the list, even though they're not the greatest singers, because of what they did or like the legacy they left behind or stuff like that, right? Because like, isn't Ozzy on this list somewhere?
Yeah, I wanted to get to that. That's the other thing. Ozzy is on this list, and I just wanted to note some of these. So number 62, George Michael. That's crime too. Number 63, Robert Plant. Number 64, Bjork. I think Bjork is horrible. Number 77, Bruce Springsteen. Number 78, Janis Joplin. Number 80, Chris Cornell. Now, we all know Chris Cornell has a goddamn drop-dead amazing voice. Number 82, Steve Perry, for Christ's sake. 85, Johnny Cash. Michael Jackson doesn't come in until 86. Stevie Nicks at number 93. Bob Marley, 98. Number 100, Elton John. And I want to note, no Billy Joel on this list. Number 102, Tay-Tay, Taylor Swift. Number 105, Eddie Vedder. Number 107 is Lou Reed. 109, Roger Daltrey of The Who. 110, The Weeknd, for Christ's sake. 111, Fiona Apple. Oh, my God. 112, Ozzy. Unreal. 114, Chrissy Hine. 117, Patti Smith. Not Smythe, Smith. 118, John Fogerty. 125, Joe Strummer of The Clash. 129, Rob Halford of Judas Priest. 130, Courtney Love. Jesus Christ. 133, Neil Young. 134, Axl Rose. This is a real shocker. 137, El DeBarge makes it ahead of 140, Bono. My God, the voice of regeneration.
I'm going to save you from having a heart attack and us listening to you read the entire list.
Well, it's not the whole list. I'm just pointing out a few. Listen, I'm almost done. 147, Barbra Streisand. 152, Michael Stipe of R.E.M. 157, Robert Cure the Smith. 165, Ronnie James Dio. 166, Morrissey. 167, Mark Anthony. 168, Deborah Harry of Blondie. And 173, Marianne Faithfull. Now, the bottom half here, I just want to give you a little heads up. 175, Lana Del Rey. 176, Iggy Pop. 181, Bob Seger. 187, Bonnie Raitt. 193, Brandy. 194, Kelly Clarkson. 196, Paul Westerberg of The Replacements. 198, Billie Eilish. And 199,
blood pressure
Glenn
going
Danzig.
up the more you go on this list.
Well, this is a big one. I'm dying. You hear that, Elizabeth? I'm coming to join you, honey.
It's got to be the worst list they've put out yet. That's how bad it is.
Now, what was their qualifier, though? Because when I first saw this list, I was like, I'm thinking, oh, these are the best singers ever. But as you pointed out, some of these people are not. If it was just like best vocal ability, shouldn't be there at all.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, I get Aretha Franklin. I get
of course.
Whitney Houston.
Yeah,
right? I mean,
of course.
Those are slam dunks.
Right.
But I don't get Bob Dylan. I don't even get Ozzy.
I know.
So
Glenn Danzig. I mean, it's crazy.
Right, but do you have do you remember what they put down? Because they said there was a reason they picked some of these people.
I don't have it right in front of me. I think what they were saying was it was just like, it was their whole presentation and performance as a singer, not just the vocal, but the presentation. But if you're dealing with that, come on now. I mean, first of all, let's forget about Van Halen for a second. Just some of the people that were so low on the list. How do you put Freddie Mercury at 14? Like, he should be way higher than that. Because that guy not only had incredible vocal ability, but he was one of the greatest frontmen of all time. Like, you're going to put Beyonce ahead of fucking Freddie Mercury? I mean, are you serious? How do you even put John Lennon ahead of Paul McCartney, for Christ's sake? That's nuts. You put Elton John there, but you don't put Billy Joel? Billy Joel's got a better voice than Elton John. I don't know, man. It's really nuts and lots of PC choices here. I mean, Billie Eilish. Amazing. I mean, not that she's done anything wrong with her. I don't know about, being on that Glenn Danzig. Jesus Christ. I mean.
Well, here's what they say. So they say, before you start scrolling and commenting, which I feel is directed exactly at you, Mr. Cribbles.
Oh, my Lord.
It says, keep in mind that this is the greatest singers list, not the greatest voices list. Personally, to me, I'm not quite sure what the difference is there, but they go on to say, talent is impressive, genius is transcendent. Oh, they use Ozzy as an example. They say, as our write-up for the man who ended up at number 112 notes, Ozzy Osbourne doesn't have what most people would call a good voice, but boy, does he have a great one that could apply to more than a few people here. In all cases, what mattered most to us was originality, influence, the depth of an artist's catalog, and the breadth of their musical legacy. So it's not just how many octaves they can sing and things like that. But anyway, let's remember, these lists are all subjective, and it's just there to start a conversation and upset people like my partner over here. I mean, honestly, when I saw this article, I was like, oh, here we go. It's going to be like shooting fish in a barrel.
Oh, yeah.
And sure enough, you just took the bait. Hook, line, and sinker.
Yeah, you know me. I can't help it. But Dave, El DeBarge ahead of Bono. Can you imagine if you're Bono and you're reading that and seeing El DeBarge is ahead of you?
I mean, look, this is just how they put it together. It's all subjective, and people are just going to yell, cry, and scream. Listen, I don't disagree with you on some of these. I'm kind of like, I don't understand how some people are ahead of another, or even why some people are on this list. Bob Dylan, like you said, great songwriter. He was. Great singer. He wasn't. And I'm really not sure what kind of legacy he really left behind as a singer. So,
right. That's
but
crazy.
Anyway.
Yeah, it's crazy. Yeah. Moving on here. Wanted to let you know that we have some interesting news on the Mr. Big front. So, Eric Martin, the singer for Mr. Big, said that Mr. Big is definitely going to come back. And there's no question about it. It's going to happen in the middle of the summer of 2023. There's going to be a replacement drummer for the late Pat Torpey. They won't announce who he is. He says it won't be Matt Starr because Matt's doing his own thing. But they have a new drummer. Said the guy stepped up and everybody knows him. He said it's a really cool thing that he's doing it, and he's a big fan of Pat Torpey. I think Pat would approve of this new guy. So that's exciting news to know that's coming. And then Billy Sheehan did an interview with Talk Louder, which is the podcast with Metal Dave Glessner and the vocalist for Dangerous Toys, Jason McMaster. And he was talking about David Lee Roth. He says, Dave is a phenomenon of nature, and he is still my hero, and I'm still supremely and forever grateful for the break he gave me. And he said, we had a great ride together and a wonderful time. He's a jokester and a comedian, and I learned so much from him. It's unbelievable. It's like getting a PhD in showbiz 101, and he knew it inside and out, and he is on, and if he's not on, he's probably not there. If he's not around, he's probably not on. But if he's around, he's on, and he's never not on. So he said that Roth is a very smart guy. He doesn't think Van Halen would have been Van Halen without Dave's lyrics, because he said they weren't your typical baby I love you lyrics. And the stuff he did on Eat 'Em and Smile was fantastic. He says, I think if we would have kept that Eat 'Em and Smile vibe and style, the band would have done incredibly well. Unfortunately, he made a left turn and did 1998's Skyscraper. Takes a lot of courage to make that kind of turn. I give him credit for the courage. I didn't like the results of it myself personally, like David Bowie with Ziggy Stardust suddenly came out with the 1984 record, and then he broke up the original band and went off and just went into the dance kind of thing. It kind of took a lot of guts. So I think Dave kind of did the same thing with Skyscraper. Unfortunately, it was not as successful as it could have been. He also talked about something that he talked about on our podcast in the past, about the Eat 'Em and Smile Pro Shot video that he has. He says, I've got it. I have it. I'm the only guy who does. It's Pro Shot, and it's the Dave Tour, but it's Dave's business, so I can't do anything with it, unfortunately. And at some point, maybe I'll try to reach out and get in touch with Dave. Do you still want to put this out? Because I have a Pro Shot video of it, and I forgot that I have it, but I know that no one else has it. He says, the audio is good, not great, but it's better than most handheld camera things that are out there. So, what do you make of that, Dave? Mr. Big coming back, Billy talking about Dave. What do you make of all that?
Still waiting for our invitation to come out to Bill's.
Oh, I know. Wouldn't that be great?
For the viewing party. Billy, if you're listening, I'll still bring the popcorn, man.
That's right. That's right. So what do you think about Mr. Big coming back? That's a surprise.
Yeah. I mean, that's good. I think, those guys have a solid following, and they'll sell out in Japan like nobody's business. Yeah. I'm curious who the drummer will be.
Yeah, very curious. Mr. Big has a fantastic catalog. Paul Gilbert is still phenomenal on guitar. He's a great player. In fact, he was recently quoted in an interview he did, which he did with Premier Guitar, and he was talking about he's one of the few musicians that can play Van Halen songs on demand because he knows the songs backwards and forwards by memory. And he said it was kind of his training ground as a kid. He said when those albums came out, I tried to learn everything I could. I should clarify that I never tried to learn the solos because I immediately recognized their spirit. And that was kind of Ed's thing. But Paul Gilbert, a huge Van Halen fan. So I love Mr. Big. If you've never seen Mr. Big live, they are a great band live. So I'm very curious. They would make a great package with a couple of other bands. They could make a really nice summer package, Dave. What do you think of that?
Yeah, we'll see. Haven't heard anything yet. From what I've heard, I don't think the U.S. dates are coming up right away. I think they're playing elsewhere first.
We'll have to see, but I definitely want to catch them if they come. Also wanted to let you guys know that David Lee Roth has continued with the Roth Show podcast. He's been dropping episodes left and right, so he seems to be pretty active on that front. In the second episode of the second season, he talked about Van Halen's past when they were short of cash and most of their money went toward pursuing their musical ambitions. He says, we stopped eating in 1972 because every single single penny went into the gas tank or equipment. Eddie would boil his strings in order to temper them or to get them to stretch, but he also boiled them so he could reuse them again. He said, our parents, they pretty much abandoned us and said, look, if you're going to choose music, professional music, as you do for a living, that's a wildly unstable area and you are on your own. And we were. So every penny we had went into the gas tank, and these were the golden years. He said, I would go over to the Van Halen's house. Al Van Halen would come out of his house with a sandwich that his mom made him. He would always give me half of it, put the other half in his mouth, and hand me the bass drum. And then he talked about that if they had more than $5, they'd go down to the Armenian grocery store, and if they were shortchanged, they would let them get away with it because they knew that they were going to be at the next backyard party. And he was talking about this is a lot of where these early days were based on the lyrics of Somewhere Over the Rainbow Bar and Grill, and he played that song. And interesting that he's really getting very reflective in his old age. Dave, what do you think?
Well, that to me was very interesting.
Yeah.
And I certainly did not mind listening to that on his podcast. That's absolutely the stuff that I want to hear. But then I think it was the episode after that, he talked about something else, completely non-musical related, and I was like, now I remember why I don't listen to his podcast regularly.
That's true.
I mean, you know, he tells an interesting story, but if you're not really into the topic, it's like, you know, and he's still kind of sort of doing that, Roth show, we'll be back. I mean, he doesn't say that explicitly, but there's still that whole thing going on. So, yeah, if you're a fan of David Lee Roth's stories, I absolutely recommend listening to the podcast. If you're looking for it to exclusively be music related, you're going to be disappointed. And, oh, by the way, an interesting observation from one of the guys on the DLR cast, and that is when you hear Dave tell stories about the good old days, they're always Van Halen, and they're always before they made it big.
Oh, that's a good point. Good point.
It's never after 1978 or after they hit it big, and it's never about his solo career. He does
never
not
talks about his solo career.
About that, right?
It's amazing.
He does not talk about that at all.
It's
like,
unreal.
Come on, Dave. Give me a break.
Yeah, good
I mean,
point.
you were doing that for years.
Yeah.
And where are those stories? Nothing.
Amazing.
Nothing.
Really is amazing. Wow, unbelievable. So that is shocking. And I've said that before, though. I never understood why his solo career is never addressed. He never talks about it. Never talks about the Eat 'em and Smile band. Nothing with that. It's always the old days, like pre-album old days. So yeah, really,
I
really
mean, I'm sure he has a bunch of great stories on that. I'm not taking that away. I'd love to hear his view on them. But Greg Renoff has to be sitting there going, where were you when I was writing my book?
Well, you know, I mean, Dave's only going to save his material for Dave. He's not necessarily
I understand that, but you know, it's interesting. If they could just rein him in to talk about those things, I think more people would be interested to listening. Instead of these topics that are, I mean, they're interesting that Dave kind of tells them, but I don't know how many people are really interested in what he's interested in.
Let me tell you something.
He's not picking popular topics that tons of people are waiting to hear about.
No, but you know what? I would even love to hear him talk about, of course, Van Halen, old days, this, that. I'd like to hear him talk about the music scene, talking about working with different promoters, this and that, and different, you know, different cities, different venues, maybe some female stories. You don't have to mention names. That would be kind of cool. Also, like, Dave, he came up in the high time of the record industry, the 80s and MTV, and there's so many elements that he could get into without even getting into arguments or the dark stuff or whatever. Just talk about the making of the California Girls video or like all kinds of cool stuff that he could talk about. I mean, he has so much insight. It's insane. But I hope he gets into some of that. But you know, Dave, he's swirling, you know. Anyway, So we also want to let you guys know there's this organization. It's a worldwide organization. My kids used to go to this, by the way, called School of Rock. You know, some kids do soccer and some kids do football. And my kids went to the School of Rock. And this is a worldwide organization that teaches kids how to play rock music. Well, there is a School of Rock in Germantown. And this guitarist by the name of George House, he went out and they were playing Drop Dead Legs, David. Deep cut off 1984. And here's a clip. So George said to the Van Halen news desk, Eddie has always been my biggest influence. The precision, complexity, and style of Eddie's playing is what got me into guitar when I was only 7 years old. He will forever be my biggest influence as well as the biggest influence for countless guitarists around the globe. This is the kind of stuff that legacies are made from. When kids that young learn your music, a deep cut like Drop Dead Legs, and still get inspired by it and then go write their own music. That was really cool, Dave. What do you think of that?
Yeah, that was really cool. It's nice to see that there's still people out there who find inspiration from Eddie Van Halen. And man, that totally was an awesome deep cut that they picked. I mean, is not much better than Drop Dead Legs in terms of a Van Halen deep cut.
Yeah, so, love that. Love that.
Yeah, kudos to you, sir. You have excellent taste.
Recently, Valerie Bertinelli went on social media screaming that New Year's Day is much happier this year than last year, and she was smiling and twirling around to Taylor Swift's Clean. She says, from a young age, New Year's Day has always been one of my absolute favorite days. For the last 5 or 6 years, it's been the saddest. No more. There is so much more to look forward to now, when before it just looked endlessly sad, scary, lonely, and stressful. I have no idea what's ahead for me, but I'm not worried. I'm free. This New Year's Day 2023 is the first day of the rest of my life. So she is celebrating the fact that she's divorced. She's 62 years old, and a lot of details came out about this, which was pretty crazy, saying that Tom and Valerie's divorce was less than amicable. Now, she had a prenup, but Tom pushed to get spousal support even though she had a prenup. Said Tom was requesting $50,000 a month and wanted an additional $200,000 to cover his legal fees, and planned to put the $50,000 towards a forensic accountant to determine the full extent of her wealth and assets. So Tom claimed he was having trouble finding work following their split. Although he's educated as a financial planner, he said his license expired during their marriage and he didn't renew it because he was focused on building up his wife's business, saying he didn't have the bandwidth for a full-time job. And he had to take a temporary job at Postal Annex in Malibu for $16 an hour. Valerie apparently was paying him $8,000 a month while they were estranged, but she cut him off after filing for divorce. By September, Tom and Valerie reached a settlement and they finalized their divorce, but she ended up having to pay him $2.2 million settlement. However, this was a one-time payment and the court denied Tom's request for ongoing spousal support. She called it a happy divorce and that November 22nd, 2022 was the second best day of her life. She's absolutely thrilled to be out and free, Dave, and single. So what do you make of that?
Happy New Year, Val.
And we're wrapping up Van Halen news with just a little heads up to let you guys know there's a new Van Halen book out there, believe it or not, called The Van Halen That I Knew by John Stix, S-T-I-X. And he did interviews with Ed exploring Van Halen 1 all the way through Balance, and he also did conversations with Dave, Sammy, Alex, and Michael. He said Eddie was warm and kind and nice to me and made you feel special when you were around him. At our first meeting during Van Halen's debut tour at Montrose and Journey, Ed said to me, I am not a rock star, and as long as I've known him, he never acted like one. So that's an interesting book that's out there. It's over 200 pages. Available at barnesandnoble.com and amazon.com. The Van Halen That I Knew by John Stix, S-T-I-X. Dave, what do you make of that?
I guess I'll just have to add it to my pile.
That's
Keep it
right.
coming.
That wraps up Van Halen news.
And that's the way it is. Good night.
And of course, we are out to celebrate Edward Van Halen's 68th birthday. Would have been his 68th birthday. The man this month on the 26th of January turns 68. Unfortunately, Ed is no longer with us. But that doesn't mean we don't celebrate him. So Dave and I did a special deep dive discussion of the Wildlife soundtrack from 1984 when Eddie Van Halen scored an entire feature film by Cameron Crowe. And he does the entire score. There's over 15 pieces of music. Dave and I break it down track by track, and it's really something special. This is something that's not available to the public, but it is out there on bootleg and YouTube and stuff like that, so it's something that we want to bring to your attention. And it's very Van Halen related because a lot of Van Halen songs stemmed from this movie score. So we get into all that, but before that happens, we got a boatload of mail that's been stocking up since Christmas, and we got to get through all that. It's going to be kicking Dave off with a nice thick sack for January 2023, and that's all coming up next. Take a listen.
For Edward and I, there is a lot of whatever that chemical is in guys that, you know, we never lost it. We both are competitive with ourselves personally to an obsessive, whatever you call it, obsessive compulsive. I mean, with or without an Eddie Van Halen in my life, you know, a lot of my time is spent with my head in my hands. Come on, Dave, come on. Like this, and still to this day, and he as much or more so. Then together with each other, there is that mutual support of, wow, am I glad I met you? Wow, we've done some great stuff together. And that also combines with, I think you're in my space.
Happy birthday, Eddie. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, happy birthday, happy birthday, Eddie.
Happy birthday, Eddie.
If you need a dose of VH, get a taste of the closest thing. Romeo Delight, the ultimate Van Halen tribute band, playing all the hits from the David Lee Roth era, first classic 6 albums, plus deep cuts, some of which have never been played live before by the band. They even throw in popular tracks from the Sammy Hagar era and solo hits. The most viewed Van Halen tribute band on YouTube, Romeo Delight, doing customized recreations of staging, instruments, and costumes from the classic Van Halen era. They even perform entire Van Halen albums in sequence. Romeo Delight plays theaters, casinos, summer indoor and outdoor festivals, and special events. They're also available for private parties. To contact them, call Bud Blanche at 215-704-5144. That's 215-704-5144. or via email at sonicparade1@yahoo.com. Romeo Delight, the ultimate Van Halen tribute band. Author Greg Renoff is back with a new book, Ted Templeman, A Platinum Producer's Life and Music. The new biography of the record producer Ted Templeman, who went on to produce Van Halen, the Doobie Brothers, Van Morrison, Aerosmith, Sammy Hagar, and more. The book, which runs $19.95, and it's currently available at Amazon.com. From the man who brought you Van Halen Rising comes Ted Templeman, A Platinum Producer's Life and Music, written by Templeman as told to Greg Renoff. Available for only $19.95 at Amazon.com. Order it today. Need a laugh? Check out the Funny How Comedy Podcast, which focuses on upbeat conversations with legendary comedians. It's free on Spreaker and iTunes. Check us out on Facebook at Funny How Comedy Podcast, on Twitter at Funny How Podcast, on Instagram at Funny How Comedy Podcast, or email us at funnyhowcomedypodcast@gmail.com.
Hi, this is Jesse Harms, keyboard player for Sammy Hagar, REO Speedwagon, Eddie Money, and a couple more. You're listening to Dave and Dave Unchained.
Pick up the new book, Eruption, Conversations with Eddie Van Halen, by Brad Tolinski and Chris Gill. These music journalists share with fans new and old alike a candid, compulsively readable, and definitive oral history of the most influential rock guitarist since Jimi Hendrix. It is based on more than 50 hours of unreleased interviews they recorded with Eddie Van Halen over the years, most of them conducted at the legendary 5150 Studios at Ed's home in Los Angeles. The heart of Eruption is drawn from these intimate and wide-ranging talks, as well as conversations with family, friends, and colleagues. In addition to discussing his greatest triumphs as a groundbreaking musician, including an unprecedented dive into Van Halen's masterpiece 1984, the book also takes an unflinching look at Edward's early struggles as a young Dutch immigrant unable to speak the English language, which resulted in lifelong issues with social anxiety and substance abuse. Eruption, Conversations with Eddie Van Halen, also examines his brilliance, who changed the face of guitar manufacturing. Eruption, Conversations with Eddie Van Halen. Get your copy today on Amazon.com. Check out the new podcast, The Rock Quarry, your place to hear in-depth interviews with some of rock's most colorful characters, with your host, entertainment journalist David J. Criblay. The Rock Quarry is available for free on Spreaker and iTunes. You can check us out on Facebook at The Rock Quarry Podcast, on Twitter at Rock Quarry Pod, on Instagram at The Rock Quarry Podcast, or email us at therockquarrypodcast@gmail.com. Take a trip to the rock concerts of the 80s in this new full-color 300-page book, Pictures Alive, filled with never-before-seen photos. Go back and see the mighty Van Halen at their peak from two amazing concerts in 1982 and 1984. Plus photos from Sammy Hagar and David Lee Roth's solo tours, and many other bands of the day. Filled with amazing photos, classic stories, original ticket stubs, and more. If you're a fan of Van Halen, you will not be disappointed. Hit the ground running with Pictures Alive, the new book, now available at picturesalive.net. That's picturesalive.net. picturesalive.net. Get it today.
And it is that conflict, it is that collision, that sound, in that, here's that Japanese shit again. In sumo, that's called tachiai. When they collide, boom! You can hear that all the way across the arena. And that's the sound of Van Halen, is that there is a mutual push-pull, like you found on all the most colorful football teams and baseball teams, reason that people still wear, that Oakland Raiders logo. It comes from whatever city it's in today. It hails back to Oakland, California of the late 70s, when they were the wildest bad boys.
All right, Dave, you know what time it is.
Dave and Dave's mailbag is big and round. Dave says he's tired, can't lift it off the ground. He wants a light bag likes those the best. And he likes the short mail better than the rest. And he said, well, I think that you're headed for a whole lot of letters. Well, I think that you're headed for a whole lot of letters. Well, I think that you're headed for a boatload of letters. And letter number 1 comes from...
That's right, it's mailbag time again. And we're starting off the year with a nice sack of mail. We're going to get right to it. We're going to start with letter number 1. Comes from Kurt 5150 Snyder, and he says, love the podcast. It's been a while since I've written in. In lieu of Quiet Dave's love for letters and mention of Hot for Teacher intro for the past few months on the podcast, here is the answer from the horse's mouth. Attached is a picture of Ted Templeman, A Platinum Producer's Life and Music, page 342. And in the paragraph, it says here, Don and I have also worked with Alex to create his trademark drum intro for the song Hot for Teacher. There is one thing about the drum part that's flown under the radar. If you listen to the very beginning, it doesn't sound like a drummer. It's too random of a pattern. That's because the first 5 seconds are the Lamborghini exhaust. Then Al's electronic drums come in. It took Don a lot of time and work to match up the sound of the Simmons drums to the sound of the idling engine. I hope this helps put this topic to bed. Keep up the good work and happy holidays to you both. Kurt 5150 Snyder. So I realize that this is what it says in the book, and Kurt, thank you so much for pointing that out. My only thing is, could he possibly be confusing this with Panama? And I've said this before, and I'll say it again. I just find it strange that they would use the Lamborghini trick twice on the same album on back-to-back singles. Is there any way he's confusing this, Dave?
Well, this is a tough one, right? Because he was there.
He was there.
So part of me is like, if anybody would know, it would be him. But I've never heard this mentioned by Ed, by Al,
right,
by anybody else. And we have really discussed this topic a lot.
Ad nauseum, yeah.
And lots of people have given lots of different explanations. And I don't know. I mean, this is one man's opinion. I really don't think it was just a straight recording of the microphone against the Lamborghini. I really don't think that at all. I think at best they got the Lamborghini sound, somehow programmed it into the Simmons drums, and Al played it on the drum. And that's how they got the sound. And we've gotten a few different theories on that. And again, one man's opinion, that's what I think happened. At this point, I don't think we'll ever really know.
Unless Al or Don comes out and really explains the whole thing. The thing that really throws me off is if you listen to it, it doesn't have that exhaust sound. It's too clean. It's too clean. You know, an exhaust sound has more of a gurgle, has more of a rough kind of, it's too clean a sound to be an exhaust of a machine of that magnitude. It just doesn't sound right to me.
It is a clean sound.
Yeah.
That is a good point.
And especially, you got to remember, this is a gas-guzzling, oil-filled engine. Anyone, whether it's a Lamborghini or a forklift, they all have that sort of engine gas-guzzling feel to it. I can understand how the drum pattern may be modeled after that exhaust, but I cannot really feel like that is the actual exhaust. But I could be wrong. I mean, I don't know. I really feel at this point that Alex is the only one, or Don, who could explain this. The only other thing that I want to bring up here is a lot of the readings that I have done about the making of 1984 was Ted came in and out. He wasn't there every day the way he was with the early Van Halen albums. At that point, he was very knee-deep in Warner Brothers activity at the office, you know, being a VP and stuff like that. he was certainly producing the album. He certainly was involved. But a lot of people say that it was really Don and Ed who produced that album. And that,
well, right. It was in 5150 Studios.
Right.
And I seem to remember that Ted had voiced his frustration
that
it was in those studios. So, you know what? They may have done that. I mean, they may have recorded that. And then Ed and Don, late at night, were like, nah, we're stripping that out. That could have very well happened.
Could be anything.
Yeah.
And maybe, Wolf might even know the answer. Even though he wasn't there, he might know the answer because of his uncle, this and that. Not really sure, but somehow this will come out. I'm sure it will at some point. But unfortunately, it kind of remains a mystery. I almost think Alex likes that it's a mystery because it's like a cool thing that everybody talks about. I mean, I can't speak for the man. I almost get that feeling like it's like a cool myth in a way. You know what I mean? So who knows? I have no idea. My head spins the more times we keep talking about this.
I know. Unless somebody comes out with a straight answer to confirm or deny Ted's claims, we'll never really know.
I know. Letter number 2 comes from Mark Carlton from sunny old Middle England. He says, hey, Diamond Daves, I was listening to your older cast while picking up my son from the station. You were talking about how Dave would sound on the evil spammy music. I went through YouTube, and this comes up on my feed. Holy shit. It's not perfect, but it shows how much better and how much more clever Dave is than either of the singers that followed him. The vocal lines are so much more interesting than either Gary Sharon or Sammy Hagar, and actually made me a little depressed. So he sent us a link from this guy, Fran, who did this entire matchup of the 5150 music to some of the lyrics and vocals from Eat 'Em and Smile. He says here, on a serious note, when I was a kid, Sammy's lyrics or lame melodies didn't bother me. It's all about Ed, right? But as I get older, I realize that putting that crap against such brilliant music is just lazy, embarrassing, and insulting. Seriously, Vince Neil takes more time with his lyrics than Sammy Hagar. What's the ratio? Around 2 songs out of 10 where he makes an effort? Anyway, going off topic, and here, check it out, and he sent us the link. Mark Carlton from sunny old Middle England. Well, Mark, I have to tell you, the moment I heard Why Can't This Be Love is when I was shocked. So now when I was young and I bought that single, it was actually a 45 at the time, and I played that, I got freaked out. I mean, it just didn't sound like Van Halen to me, and the lyrics were, less than stellar, and it was such a straight-ahead tune. And it's not that I disliked the song, I just couldn't believe it was Van Halen, and felt like the guitar solo was less than stellar. Then I flipped it over and heard the B-side, which was Get Up, and I was like, oh, that sounds like Van Halen, and instantly felt better. But I agree, Sammy's lyrics are fluffy as fuck. Not always. When he tries, he's excellent. Sammy's an excellent vocalist. He's a very nice guy. I've met him. I've interviewed him. He's very cool. His lyrics are great when he works on them. I love Seventh Seal. I love Right Now. There's plenty of songs where he's really put the effort in. That Judgment Day, he's done great on. There's a lot of songs that have some great lyrics. Sometimes it's less than stellar, for sure. But remember, on that video where Fran talks about one thing, and it really blew my mind. He talks about when the band was headlining the Monsters of Rock tour. And he says, here they are going out on this big rock tour, and they put out OU812, which was a light, thin, kind of fluffy album. And I remember even as an 18-year-old, and I had tickets to the show, I couldn't believe how light that Van Halen album was that they were riding that whole show on. And these other bands are like the Scorpions and Metallica and Dokken and Kingdom Come, and they were so much heavier than Van Halen. And Van Halen was coming out with When It's Love and Finish What You Started. So yeah, it was weird. It was weird. So now when Fran was doing his best putting these together, he was mashing up Cabo Wabo with Dave's lyrics to Bump and Grind. Here's a clip of that so you can get a little taste of what he did.
Looking for love in the back of a taxi. Got lucky in a cheap hotel. Hot pants, nasty. Don't bother knocking, cause you know damn well. Just like baby's kitchen, carrying dead. Ring up all the big first prize. Eating in the glory, ain't going home tonight. Just like baby's kitchen, carrying dead. Ring up all the big first prize. Eating in the glory,
So now you can't really do this because they weren't working together, and it's very hard to weave two separate things together. But I get your point. So one thing I thought was interesting, Dave, I wonder if it would be illegal. And you tell me what you think about this. I don't think anybody would ever do this. But you know how Roth is remaking all these Van Halen songs that we keep talking about, Everybody Wants Some, You Really Got Me, you know?
Yeah,
What if he took the old Sammy songs, not the lyrics, but the music, and decided to re-record them with his own lyrics and melodies? Do you think that would be a major legal problem?
Oh, yeah, I think so. Well, first of all, he'd probably have to give Sam songwriting credit anyway.
Not if he didn't use any lyrics or melodies.
No, I think that's almost an impossibility because I really don't think that could happen because Sam was a part of that writing process. The vocal melody is pretty ingrained in those songs. I mean, Dave would really have to tear them apart and redo them for him to record a vocal over.
Now, wait a second, though. Remember this. He's not going to use Eddie's tracks. He's going to take his band, and they're going to reinterpret the song. So, you know what I mean? He's not going to strip the track. You see what I'm saying? So, like, you know, he's not gonna strip it out and just use Eddie's thing and then sing over it. I'm talking about if his band learned the music for 5150 and then Dave decided to work with the band and write lyrics and melodies for all of those songs and almost be like, hey, this is what the follow-up to 1984 would have been like.
Okay, now I follow you.
Yeah.
He probably can as long as he pays.
Yeah. Oh, yeah,
everybody
he's got to pay.
Needs to be paid.
But wouldn't it be the same thing as if someone did a cover, right? Like, so if someone does a cover...
Well, yeah, or a mix or a sample or something like that. I think he certainly can as long as he gets permission from... I don't even know if he needs permission.
I don't think he needs it if he re-records it. If he re-records it, there's all these little hooks. Like, I guess you pay like some sort of ASCAP fee or something. Like, you have to pay a fee. When you do a covers album, you pay a fee, whatever fee it is to cover a song. But how interesting would it be, Dave, if he did that, then did OU812, then he did the Fuck album, then he did the Balance album? I mean, it would be kind of interesting if you think about it, you know?
It would be interesting, though I think he'd probably start out saying, I wouldn't have recorded half of those songs. I mean, he's not going to do that for OU812. Because he probably was like, I wouldn't have recorded most of that album. I think it would be cool, and I don't think he would ever do this, but it would be cool if he did an album's worth of Sammy Hagar era songs that he thought he could do.
Oh, I mean, like mix them up, like pick a few from each album.
Reimagine them David Lee Roth style.
Oh, that would be cool. Now that would be really cool if he cherry picked the ones that would work.
Right. Because you're not going to make him do when it's live.
Right. But I tell you what, he could kill Finish What You Started. He could really do a good job with that, I think. I could see Roth doing that, and I could see him doing it in his own Dave style. There's certain things I could see him doing. And let me tell you something. What was very interesting was to hear the way he mixed Cabo Wabo with Bump and Grind. Although it doesn't totally fit, it was interesting to hear Dave's voice over those riffs. It really was. I mean, it's not going to totally fit because they're totally separate songs.
Yeah, I understood what he was trying to do, but it was tough for me to listen to for a long time. For me, it really didn't work. I get the exercise he was trying to do and trying to get us to somehow imagine how that would work, but that's a big what-if game. And you know my head hurts when we start going down that road.
All right, so we don't want your head turns. We're going to go on to letter number 3, Dave, who comes from our semi-musical director, Steve Osteich from Dorr, Michigan, and he's writing in here. Steve's the guy who does the Mailbag theme song, and he says, hey, Dave and Dave, much of the early background vocals for Van Halen were Mike, Ed, and Dave, and later Mike, Ed, and Sam. Sometimes it would be two-part harmony consisting of only Mike and Ed. To my ears, Mike's tone is bright and sharp, Ed's is thick and duller. When combined, a different tone emerged like a natural effect which created that perfect classic Van Halen background vocal sound, regardless if Dave or Sammy were singing with them or not. Some examples to demonstrate the tone created by just Mike and Ed's blends are Women in Love at about 1 minute and 29 seconds after Dave sings Stay the Night. Mike and Ed come in, Oh, Women in Love, Make Up Your Mind, Oh, Women in Love, Women in Love, ending at about 1:50. Hear About It Later from Oakland 81 at 1 minute and 29 seconds in. After Dave sings I Don't Wanna, Mike and Ed sing I Don't Wanna Hear About It Later. I don't wanna, baby, I don't wanna. That's perfect, the classic Van Halen background sound. Summer Nights from Live Without an Ed, about 4 minutes and 45 seconds in after Sam's Wow, you hear Ed and Mike sing Ah, Summer Nights. And from an MTV segment where they were goofing off at Cabo at 38 seconds in, Sammy sings I Will Show You All Around, and they sing a very quick Down in Cabo. That is the sound. And Mike and Ed have a sound in their vocal blend that cannot quite be replaced. Sammy has said that the classic Van Halen background vocal is only Mike. If he really believed that, then why would he have asked Ted how to get it? He must realize that while Mike sounds awesome as always, it's just not the same classic Van Halen sound. I wonder if Sammy just never wanted publicly to give credit to Ed for background vocals because the brothers gave Mike the shaft. Would love to know your thoughts on that. All the best, guys. Steve Osteich from Dorr, Michigan. And wow, thanks for selecting my whiskey mailbag intro. It's truly an honor. Cheers. Well, Steve, I want to thank you for the intro for the mailbag. We're happy to use it. It's our pleasure to have it, and everybody's enjoying it. I know we're enjoying it. And it's very true. The Van Halen background vocals are a special formula of Ed, Mike, and Sam, or Ed, Mike, and Dave. Sometimes when Ted was producing the albums, even he would pitch in and sing some background vocals in that blend. Now, calling the whole Ted thing, that Sam calling Ted, that was sort of, I don't know, a publicity stunt for the album to link it to Van Halen. But the weird part is, and I mentioned this during the Crazy Times episode, is Sam and Mike do have that special blend. There's no doubt about that. They have a certain sound, just Sam and Mike together. However, it's not on that album. It's not prominent on Crazy Times. Therefore, it seems false. But we are thrilled to have you on there for the mailbag episode. And listen, if you're up for maybe doing a little song for the Van Halen news, we might consider that if you want to be working on that. But I know you did such a good job on that. I hope it didn't take too much of your time. Anyway, what do you say, Dave?
Yeah, could always use another theme for the Van Halen news. Won't say no to anything you come up, Steve.
Right.
I do agree with you, Dave, that Ed does not get enough credit for the Van Halen background sound.
Yeah.
He was a part of it, and it was just part of that magic between him and Mike.
Right.
And Dave or Sam, and it just worked. Also want to point out that in the early days of the band, Ted Templeman, when he was producing, would also sing some background vocals.
Yeah, I mentioned that, yeah.
And that was part of the secret sauce.
Sure.
So, yeah, you can call Ted and ask how he recorded the background vocals, and that's great. But you're never going to get the Van Halen's background sound because Ed's not there. And the other thing is that Mike sang a lot of the background vocals by himself on Crazy Times, if I'm remembering correctly.
Okay.
Right? Am I right about that?
I have to look at the stats on that, but I do remember that he was on there, yeah. I just don't feel like the background vocals are very prominent on there.
I think there was maybe one song where he did the background vocals by himself.
Okay.
I'm sure Ron will correct.
Oh, he's sharpening his knife right now.
His knife, yes, his knife and his pencil, I'm sure. Pencil. But either way, that's not the Van Halen background sound. And as you pointed out, that album does not have the Van Halen background sound at all. Mike is there, and it works. It's a good background vocal sound, but it's not a Van Halen background sound. And you're right. It's just another way to sell the album. Ooh, look, we got the Van Halen background vocal sound.
Right.
No, you don't. So I agree that Ed was a part of that, and it's tough to replicate without him.
Right. Letter number 4 comes from Chris Pianelli from Staten Island. He says, "Hey, Dave and Dave, I've been listening for about a year, and I look forward to your podcast every month. I am 56 and have been playing guitar since I was 15. I'm a big Van Halen fan and Rolling Stones fan, and I always notice similarities when I play the riffs for Brown Sugar and Unchained, especially in the opening riffs for both songs. I'd like your take on this. Agree or disagree? Keep rocking, Chris Pianelli from Staten Island." Well, Chris, it's so funny that you bring this up because those are my two favorite bands, the Stones and Van Halen, and I love both of those songs. Although I have to say I'm incredibly disappointed that the Stones will no longer play Brown Sugar for obviously PC reasons regarding the lyrics. However, I have to say it's interesting that you hear that. And now let's hear these back to back. So here's the opening riff for Brown Sugar. Here's the opening riff for Unchained. Now, I think the similarity is not in the sound, but the song structure. Both the songs start off with the signature riff that really hooks you right from the beginning, and there's a whole, I don't know how many seconds that gets you into the song before you even get to any lyrics or anything. You get the whole melody and hook with the guitar, hooking you in. So that's where I see the similarity. But one is rock and roll, meaning Brown Sugar. The other one is definitely a hard rock song. One swings, the other one sort of kicks ass. That's how I see it. How do you see it, Dave?
I see where he's going with that, but I don't hear the similarities as much as he does. Maybe that's because I don't play guitar.
Yeah.
And I don't see the similarities.
Right, we don't know the chords and everything, right?
Right,
yeah.
right. But as a listener, I don't hear it as much as he does. Interesting comparison, though.
Yeah, it's true. Letter number 5 comes from Greg Miner, and he says, "Hello, Dave and Dave. Do you think the song 2120 by Sammy Hagar is a reference to 5150? When you flip those numbers over, it sure looks like 5150. Thanks, Greg Miner." Interesting question, Greg. I think 2120 came from Sammy mispronouncing 2021 in concert. If you remember this, Dave and I talked about this, oh my God, probably a year and a half ago in the Van Halen news. We always joke around that Sammy has the thing with numbers. He's always off by numbers, whether it be album sales or very often dates. Like on his actual live album, if you listen to the Circle live album, At Your Service, I think it's called, he actually shouts out the date of the song he's playing, and the date is wrong. It's incredible. So I see where you're going with this, and I agree on paper it looks similar. Obviously, it doesn't sound similar because 5150 doesn't sound like 2120, but I understand where you're going with it. It has the similar look and feel, but I think it's like a funny reference to his mispronunciation in concert, and then he sort of turned it into like a lyric and a title. What do you think, Dave?
I wouldn't bet against you, Dave. I definitely don't think it's a reference to 5150, because if it was, Sam would be advertising that just as much as the Van Halen background vocals that are on the album. He would totally be playing that up as a 5150 reference.
Yeah, that's a good point. Good point. Yeah, that's true.
Right, but he hasn't, so I don't think that's the case.
Okay. Letter number 6 comes from, here he comes, Dave.
Look, up in the sky, it's a bird. It's a plane.
Midwest fucking Ron. That's right, it's Midwest fucking Ron, and he's got a short one here, and it's directed at me. And he says here, just a question, no criticism, but it's a little edge to it, but not much, just a question. He says, Dave C., what is the purpose of pronouncing the Crazy Times album title like you just took a big swig of moonshine? I have to tell
Ron, the truth is we did it because we knew it ticked you off.
No, that's not true.
We said, let's do it as many times as we can during the podcast.
No. I'm sure it drives Ron crazy every time I do it. But here's the thing. The reason why is, it's a fair question. My Dark Lord, I shall answer you. Sam announced his album was going to be called Crazy Times, and I swear to God, I laughed my balls off because I thought that was such a strange name for an album. Like, I thought it was almost like a throwaway title, and I thought it was kind of laughable. So it sounded to me like Bo and Luke Duke would make an album from the Dukes of Hazzard and call it Crazy Times. You know what I mean? So I decided to make it sound like Roscoe P. Coltrane from the Dukes of Hazzard and say it like Crazy Times. That's the only way I can hear it in my head, because when he said it, that's how I heard it in my head. But yes, I know I'm nuts. So go ahead, Dave. What do you think?
That's an awesome explanation. I have like nothing to add to that.
All right.
So, other than that, now it makes sense to me. Now it makes a lot more sense.
Okay.
So,
all right. Well, at least I'm clarifying.
All right.
Letter number 7 comes from Daz, and he says here, hi guys, I was reading Eruption, Conversations with Eddie Van Halen, which I highly recommend, by the way, and the book mentioned that Eddie had an in-house studio engineer that lived at his place. Unfortunately, it didn't go into much detail. Who was this? What's his story? You should get him on the show, as his story would be very interesting, especially what's in the vaults. Also, have you read this book? Your thoughts. Cheers, Daz. Well, Daz, of course. We had the authors on, and it was one of our episodes, I don't know, what was it, like a year and a half ago or so? I have to look up the number. But yeah, it's one of our past episodes. You could look it up. We had the guys on, and they were fantastic. But I also wanted to let you know, yes, that book is required reading for sure. Perhaps it was this guy, George Sayer. Did you hear about this guy, Dave? This is guy, George Sayer. And here's a clip of him talking on the 25th episode of Posado's Place.
Ed is so hands-on and so, like I said, such a purist that he loves to know that as close as he can get to plugging his guitar into the amp, straight in, that's the Ed sound.
So this could be the guy that we're talking about. Now, in terms of getting guys on, that's not easy to do because they very often sign NDAs, which is a non-disclosure form. And if you work for someone as closely as Ed, as their house engineer, you sign these NDAs so that you're not legally allowed to speak to anybody about anything you see or hear or experience during your course of work. That's sort of a protection for the famous person you work for. So I can try to see if I can get that guy on, but I don't know if he would. That, I believe, is the guy. Dave, what do you think?
Well, if anybody can get him, you can.
Oh, I'll try. Sure. I always try the best I can. There's plenty of people that I want to get on. That doesn't necessarily mean they'll come on.
Yeah, I mean, I do agree. If he was willing to talk, it would be a fascinating interview.
Oh, yeah.
For sure.
Oh, yeah.
But like you pointed out, and this is when we start sounding like Eddie Trunk.
Yeah.
But it's true.
Yeah.
It's like we have a long list of people we love on the podcast.
Yeah.
But number one, like you pointed out, can they talk?
Yeah.
Or do they have a non-disclosure agreement they're signed?
Right.
Where they're like, well, I'd love to come on the podcast, but I would say hello and goodbye, and that would be it.
I know.
Because that's all I'm allowed to say.
Exactly.
Or do they even want to come on the podcast? Because some people are like, nah, I don't feel like talking about it. Or, you know, sometimes we find people are like, I don't really have anything interesting to say.
Yeah.
And we have to come back to them and say, no, you do, really. We think you do. We respectfully ask you to rethink that. Because we wouldn't have asked you on the podcast if we didn't think what you had to say was interesting.
Right.
So sometimes that works, sometimes that doesn't. So there's a whole bunch of factors that come into play. And then, Dave, you know better than anybody, there's the scheduling game.
Oh, God, yeah.
Sometimes it takes years,
it's ridiculous,
to schedule somebody.
Yeah.
So we hear you. We have lots of great ideas of getting people on the show. Actually getting them on the show, that's the tough part. So we keep trying. You know, sometimes we find people who we never expected to get on the show, and they have great things to say, and they make the best guests. So that's how we've been rolling these past, what is it now, 6 years almost?
No. We're going to be coming up on our 7th anniversary in April.
Okay, all right. So we're up to 6 and change.
Yeah.
So it's been working so far. Yeah. So hang in there. We'll have more people that hopefully you'll find interesting.
Absolutely. Letter number 8, Dave, comes from Johnny Booth from Fredericksburg, Virginia. And he says, I'm going to try to make this quick, and then goes on for an entire page. So he says, number one, I'm going to have to shorten it. Number 1, I stepped outside a few days ago and thought my neighbor was blasting Hot for Teacher. Turns out it was his Harley running down the driveway, which I mistook for the drum intro. So now we can continue that debate. Sorry, not sorry. Oh, nice. Number 2, Eddie Trunk. I hate saying this because I respect his knowledge and longevity, but he needs to calm down. Seems like he shits on anyone who has changed since the 70s or 80s, or shits on younger bands who don't do things the way he thinks they should do them. The guy still has a stick up his ass about Jump, for fuck's sake. Times change. Artists evolve. I just feel like he's a little out of touch for 2022. Now 2023. Number 3, there's a popular trend of videos on YouTube that feature people giving genuine reactions to hearing an artist for the first time. There's tons of these videos featuring Van Halen or just Ed. It's pretty cool, and if you haven't seen any, just do a quick search for reacting to EVH or hearing Van Halen for the first time. It's fun to watch because you can tell that they know nothing about the band, and watching you share in their journey and find yourself becoming amazed all over again. I want to wish you guys and all my Van Halen loving brothers and sisters around the globe a joyous holiday season and Happy New Year. Stay frosty and cheers to 2023. Johnny Booth from Fredericksburg, Virginia. Well, regarding the Hot for Teacher debate, we've already discussed that, so I'll move that on. But regarding Eddie Trunk, you know, I tell you, I was listening to him extensively this week because I was catching up on some of his episodes. And it's funny, I don't know if it's an aging thing. I mean, Eddie's a little older than us. Dave and I are about to turn 53. Eddie's somewhere around like 57 or something like that. And it's amazing. I listened to him talk about football for a half hour on his program, which is amazing to me. I love football, and there's nothing wrong with the NFL. But it's just, you're on a hard rock metal podcast. Like, what are you doing? You know what I mean? So that's a little strange to me. I do think his show called Trunk Nation is perfect name for it because all he talks about is himself. Now, he always says he's going to open the phones and answer questions, and most of the time he says, I don't know, or if he doesn't say I don't know, he goes into just a story about whatever the person they're asking about. So it's just a little strange to me. I find him having a lot of his friends on, and then he favors, like, he loves Ronnie James Dio, and he shits on Ozzy, and he loves Sammy Hagar, and he shits on David Lee Roth, and it's just incredible. I don't know if he's just kind of sticking with what's familiar, but in my opinion, it's a little lazy in the sense that he spends a lot of time traveling all over the country hosting concerts. I don't understand that, too, why someone would hire him and pay him to host a concert. That's his business and everything, but like, it seems like he's
name recognition. He's the name.
Yeah, I understand that, but why would you pay Eddie Trunk to say, come on, hey, here's Def Leppard? Like, what does that do? I don't understand.
Well, it must do something. And man, hey, listen, if he's getting paid for it and making at least a partial living from that,
God bless
good for him, man.
God bless him. But the thing is that he's got an incredible platform. 5 days a week where he's on 2 hours a day on Sirius XM in the middle of the day. That's pretty incredible. He should be able to get so many more people on that program in the hard rock and heavy metal community. And he keeps bringing on the same guests that are his friends. And it's just a little like, you know, come on, man. Seriously? Like, you can't get some of these other people? And, you know, he shits on Kiss and he shits on this one. what are you doing? We all fucking love Kiss, and I know he's a Kiss fan, but he's just filling the program with his personal thoughts and opinions on everything. It's just becoming kind of like watching like a heavy metal version of Rush Limbaugh or something, you know what I mean? It's just a little weird. And I love Eddie. I've met him. I think he's a really nice guy. I think he's a smart guy. He's been in the business 40 years. He's got a long history of experience. And sometimes I think it's a little lazy. Like, you know what I mean? Like, there's times that like callers call in and they give him news about bands. And it's like, that should not be. He should be up on everything because that's his job. And I just find that shocking. He also really fans the Van Halen Flames really bad. His new kick, by the way, is he's like, oh, Sammy might be done. Sammy might be retired. It's like, where are you getting that Sammy's retired? Oh, he set up our program. He might not doing it. He's got dates booked already. I've already announced that on our last episode. Oh, Michael Anthony's doing this fundraiser. He might be starting his own band. Dude, where are you getting that from? He's doing a fundraiser because he always does a fundraiser for that Heart Foundation because of his grandson. Granted, that's understandable, but come on, man. He just loves to... Oh, are we going to see an Eddie Van Halen tribute this year? Are you going to stop? When are you going to stop? When are you going to stop? And don't get me wrong, no one would love an Eddie Van Halen tribute more than me. But obviously, there's family complicated issues there, and it's a sore subject. Let it the fuck go.
You know what? I think he just likes to stir the pot.
Yeah.
And he knows it'll get a response or a rise.
Yeah, I know.
And it works.
I know.
And it works because
He's
you
getting
bring
my
up
blood
any
up.
trunk, not just on this show. I've seen it online. People always have opinions about it.
Oh, I know.
So, and that's the way it is. And it keeps him top of mind, I guess. And people love him or hate him. And I don't listen to him like you do. I don't listen to him regularly. I
listen to him every day. So, I mean, I'm serious. I listen to him every day.
I mean, I don't have Sirius Radio, so I don't listen to him. Maybe some clips on YouTube.
Yeah.
Or something like that. But hey, listen, like you said, he's been doing this 40 years. It's his show. Let him talk what he wants. All your discussion points are certainly valid ones.
Yeah.
But, it's his show. He's going to do what he wants to do. And, if you don't like it, you don't have to listen. But he's still got the show, so people must still be listening.
Yeah, absolutely. Letter number 9 comes from Brandon Wall, a.k.a. Chocolate Slim. And he says, hey, Dave and Dave, I was listening to a recent episode you guys released a few months ago. And it was the one where Sammy Hagar was interviewed for Rolling Stone magazine. In the interview, I believe Sam went on to say he sold more records when he was with Van Halen than David Lee Roth did in Van Halen, which is a total fucking delusional lie he told himself. I'm sick of Sammy's lying about the album sales. Hell, just to be a conspiracy theorist in this scenario, I don't even think the 4 or 5 albums, 4 studio and 1 live, the fan base wholeheartedly bought on their own. I think the label, Warner Brothers, bought the albums in advance just to help secure their investment in Van Halen post-Diamond David Lee Roth's departure. Why do I say this? 2 reasons. Number 1, the album sales with Sam sold less and less, and Dave's still have sold post-1985 into the present. You don't believe me? Watch the video I sent you guys above at 2 minutes and 39 seconds to 3 minutes in the video. Full disclaimer, this video is from 1996. Obviously, sales have been updated since. But can you please help me out in terms of the album sales between David Lee Roth era of Van Halen and the Sammy Hagar era of Van Halen? Please. Sorry for the long-winded letter, but I just get very passionate about the band and frustrated with Sam's comments. Happy New Year and stay frosty. Brandon, a.k.a. Chocolate Slim. And then he adds some extra questions that he wants us to answer because Brandon is very demanding. And he says, P.S. I have 3 questions. Number 1, when will you do an album deep dive on Women and Children First? Number 2, when will Dave release another Van Halen cover or original song? Number 3, do you guys have an idea of which Van Halen cover David Lee Roth will release? Brandon is so enthusiastic about the program, which I really appreciate, Brandon. He's so funny. He'll email me and go, is it dropping this afternoon? when are you dropping the episode? Like, he's really into it. So I appreciate it. I really do. So to help you out, Brandon, I have gotten the closest tallies that I can for each Van Halen album, okay? And Dave is going to combat me on this, I know, but this is the closest we have. Van Halen 1 is over 15 million, 15.5, okay? Van Halen 2, over 7 million, 7.2. Women and Children First, 5.3 million. Fair Warning, 4.0 million. Diver Down, 5.7 million. 1984, 15.4 million. 5150, 8.7 million. OU 812, 5.7 million. For Unlawful Carnal Knowledge, 4.9 million. Balance, 4.8 million. Van Halen 3, hold on to your hat, Dave, 1.1 million, and Different Kind of Truth, 740,000. This is the closest I can give you, and I really, truly believe that if Alex were to take the money, and it's going to cost him about a good, say about $4,000 to get the proper sales tallied. If he pays that fee, they will re-up all those numbers, and we can have fresh numbers. He could give a shit, I'm sure. So, and he's not going to do it. But I bet you that if that was done, I bet you they're all platinum. I bet you every single album is platinum. Obviously, we all know they're platinum, but I'm talking about Van Halen 3 and A Different Kind of Truth. I bet they're all platinum. I really do. It says here 1.1 for Van Halen 3. That could very well be because it was around 7-something, I remember, in the late 90s. And I bet you it's over that now. I didn't make these numbers up. This is what's available. And to answer your questions, number one, when will we do Women and Children First? I'm not 100% sure. Hopefully soon. I'm working on that. It's in the hopper. Number two, in terms of when Dave's going to release another original song or Van Halen cover, now I have no idea because I'm not Dave, but I think my guess, I'm going to say somewhere around early February. That's my guess, okay? And my guess is if he's going to release another Van Halen cover, what will it be? I'm going to say Unchained. This is the best I can do for you, buddy. Dave, what do you have to say?
Ooh, that's a lot. Thank you for doing the research.
Yes.
I don't think your numbers are that far off. Were those just U.S. numbers, or were those international numbers?
The U.S., I believe. I'm not 100% sure, but I believe
right. I'm a little skeptical about Van Halen 3 being platinum, but okay.
All right. I knew that was coming.
But either way, your sense of scope and how each album compares to other Van Halen albums, I think is spot on. So all this boils down to is what we've always been saying, and we do agree with you, Brandon, that there is no way.
No.
Did we say no way?
Yeah.
No way that the Sam era sold more than the Dave era. Just impossible. And I'm pretty sure we've said this before. The only way that it is possible is if Sam is including the Dave era albums that were included when Sam was in the band.
Right. And he's adding in the sales of the greatest hits.
How on God's green earth do you track that? Like, the 6-pack that was sold between 1986 and 1996.
Right.
I mean, I guess you could, but that's a lot of work.
Right.
So, did Sam's albums chart better than Dave's albums? Yes, absolutely. There's no denying that. Mm-hmm. Now, was it because it was the SoundScan era as of 1991? Yes, absolutely. But still, the albums charted higher with Sam than they did with Dave, for whatever reason.
Well, there's a reason, because when 1984 was out, it was competing with some of the biggest albums of all time, considering Bruce Springsteen's Born in the USA, Prince's Purple Rain, and Michael Jackson's Thriller.
Well, just Thriller alone.
Yeah.
Just Thriller alone. Didn't allow anybody to be number one.
And by the way, Dave was mad at me.
Was it like a year?
Yeah. Well, not only that, but Dave was furious because he felt like Ed helped boost the sales of Thriller, because Ed being on Beat It made it a crossover hit, and then the rock audience started buying Thriller, which really shit-canned Van Halen going number one.
Well, okay. So either way, you can't deny what number they made on the charts.
Right.
But the sales also you can't deny.
Yeah.
So here's the bottom line. Sam has a real problem accepting the fact that sales-wise and even cachet-wise or importance of the albums in musical history, that his stuff is not on the same level as Dave's.
Right.
Like, he has a hard time accepting that his stuff doesn't sell as much or that it's not as important to the Van Halen legacy.
Right.
And we can sit here and argue all day which is better, Dave era or Sam era, which, of course, I love to do.
Right.
But we don't have time for that. But the fact of the matter is that the Dave era came first and just cemented things, if for nothing else, for Ed's playing. And by the time Sam came along, Ed was going in a different direction, and that's fine. But it wasn't as mind-blowing or original as when the band first came out.
Right.
And it just didn't sell the same volume. It just didn't. I'm not saying it's better or worse. I'm just saying that's not the case. And you know what the sad part is? Sam knows this.
He does.
He knows this, and he says it anyway. Or worse, which could be the case, he's been spouting his, you ready for this, Dave?
Yeah.
Different kind of truth. Oh! He's been spouting his different kind of truth for so long.
Wow.
I think he believes it now.
Well, I have to tell you one thing I'll say, Dave. Only time will tell if he stands the test of time.
Mic drop, we're done. Thank you.
Letter number 10 comes from Shannon the Dude. And he says, do you think that Dave saw Sammy putting out live in-studio pandemic versions of Van Halen songs and got inspired? Shannon the Dude. Yes, I totally think, Shannon, that Sammy doing his recordings of pandemic songs totally pushed Dave. Absolutely, because Dave wants to be the singer of Van Halen. Dave wants to erase Sammy's era and say, I'm the lead singer of Van Halen. I was the lead singer of Van Halen for the first 6 albums, and I was also the lead singer for the past how many years? He wants people leaving that taste in their mouth. He wants to be synonymous with him and Van Halen. That's what he wants. Why the hell else would he? He's on those recordings. There's no need for him to do that. I like them. I'm enjoying them. I think they're fun. I especially like the last one when he kind of rearranged the song a little bit. I think that's cool. But I think he's marking his own territory for sure. What do you think, Dave?
I think you're right about that.
Yeah.
I think he is marking his own territory. I don't know how directly influenced, though, he was by Sam's clips of songs, I'll call them, that he was putting out during the pandemic and eventually released as that album you love to hate so much.
Yeah, I think it's more that he's on tour singing his songs. That's pissing him off.
I think it's that. I think we've indicated this before. I think you're right. I think it's the fact that Sam's on tour singing the songs. He's the one waving the Van Halen flag with Mike, I might add.
Yep.
They're the only ones going out there touring and singing and all that stuff. And Sam, of course, is talking up a storm about Van Halen whenever he can. And I just think Dave was like, no, I am the legacy of Van Halen.
Yeah, yeah.
And I am not letting anybody forget that. And I think that is what is inspiring him to put out these Van Halen covers.
It's a dick measuring contest.
Oh, between those two, it has been and it always will be.
I know.
Absolutely.
It's their brand. It's their brand. So
it is. It's ridiculous. But yeah, it's
a joke.
I mean, this podcast would be half as long if those two weren't out there trying to prove who the rightful lead singer of the band was.
It's true. Letter number 11 comes from Eric Torbick, the perfect letter writer from New Jersey. And he says, Happy New Year, gentlemen. What do you know about the parachute stunt from the Anaheim Stadium show in 1978, other than that it was Dave's idea and obviously not the band's? Why didn't they make a bigger deal out of that stunt? I mean, they seem to pull it off perfectly, so you'd think this would be a legendary tale, especially in 1978, but it seemed like the band rarely talked about it and was kind of forgotten about. Surely they intended to capitalize on the stunt. No, rock on, Eric Torbick, perfect letter writer from New Jersey. He says, P.S. The Easter egg is no more waiting from from the whiskey in December 31st, 1977. One of the first widely circulated bootlegs back in the day. I can't tell you how many times I listened to that one, and definitely an unfinished song that needed some polishing up. Trivia: what the heck are the second verse lyrics? Dave just mumbled over them, and I have no idea what he says. All right, Eric. Neither do I know what he's saying in that verse, so I can't help you there. But you got that right. You're always right on the money. And so, yes. So, in regarding the parachute stunt. So, for those of you who don't know, on September 23rd, 1978, Van Halen played in front of 56,000 people at Summerfest at Anaheim Stadium in California. And on the bill was Boston Black Sabbath and none other than the Red Rocker, Sammy Hagar himself. And obviously, Van Halen were the new kids on the block, and they wanted to make a big splash. So they hired 4 parachute guys to fly over the stadium and land backstage, and then the boys came on the stage removing flight suits, making it look like they parachuted in to perform the show, and then they started on fire, and it was like a whole big thing. The announcer said, "From out of the sky, Van Halen is coming into the stadium," and there was a VH logo on the parachute and everything. Couple fun facts. During that day, Alex twisted his ankle while tripping over a cable. This was also the day that Ed met Sam. And when he met Sam, you know what Ed said to him? "Why the hell did you leave Montrose? I really thought that was a good band." And Sam said, because Ronnie Montrose wouldn't let him play guitar. Yes, of course it was Dave's idea, because that's a classic splashy, hammy Dave move to do something like that. Now, why wasn't it looked at as a bigger stunt or more talked about? That is an interesting thing. Perhaps it's because they don't have video of it or something like that. It's just interesting, but it was genius. And if you think about it, just so ballsy when you're playing on a bill with bigger bands than you and you're trying to steal the show. This is the thing about Van Halen. Those guys had balls. This is where Dave comes in as his specialty. But this is what made VH so incredible, right? So the band was tight and amazing. And Dave, he was the frosting on an incredibly delicious cake. He knew how to do press. He knew how to write lyrics. He knew how to put on a great show. He knew how to do videos. He knew how to do album covers. He knew how to name albums. He knew how to do all those things to make it look good and sell the band. And he made it fun and interesting, and he always did cool stuff like this. He's always been that guy, and that's why Ed needed Dave, and that's why Dave needed Ed, because they were opposites that made the combustion that was the best band of all time. So it's interesting that a lot of people don't talk about it. There is a very, very small clip. Maybe one day a whole thing will come out. A clip of them coming on stage, like 13 seconds long, of them coming on stage, removing their parachute garb. What they did was, apparently Van Halen were backstage hiding under a blanket in a van, so no one saw them. Then when the guys landed backstage, they ran out of the van and then ran on stage in their parachute outfits and then pulled them off. That's a genius stunt, Dave. What do you think?
Yeah, it was a genius stunt. I mean, it's crazy when you think about it, right? I mean, it's like,
wild.
What a great idea. There's probably not a lot of film of it because nobody was expecting it.
No, exactly. But
right?
there had to be somebody from Van Halen.
I don't know how much they filmed of that concert anyway.
I know. What a great show to film.
But yeah, what a great stunt. It would have been even better if Alex hadn't twisted his ankle, unfortunately.
I know.
I'm like, how the heck did he play the gig?
I know.
Well, that was the most amazing part.
I know.
I think. Right? Yeah, that's one of those things that not too many people know except the diehard fans. Yeah, man, that took a lot of nerve to do that because they were basically an opening act for that show. And here they come pulling that off. And it was like a mic drop moment, right?
Oh, yeah.
Here we go. And nobody else is going to top that.
Exactly. Steal the thunder. Letter number 12 come from Jeff Cottray in North Dakota. He says, "Hi, Dave and Dave. Love the podcast. Keep them long. I was listening to episode 83 where you were talking about Sammy calling Ted Templeman about the background vocals. I can't see why he would call Ted about that. Since 5150, he's been happy with the background vocals with other producers. Also, I don't think you can recreate those background vocals because we no longer have Eddie's voice in the mix, and I think the bigger problem is getting the original Van Halen background vocals at this point is that he's missing the biggest piece is not having David Lee Roth's voice in the mix. And I think Dave was a huge part of those background vocals. What do you think? Jeff Cottray. Yes. Well, we discussed this prior, of course, but what I suggest, I agree, 100%. You can't recreate them. What I want everybody to do, though, is you gotta listen to some of those songs, whether it be from the Hagar era or the Roth era, in earphones. Get some real sharp sets of earphones. Bottoms Up is a good one to listen to. Somebody Get Me a Doctor. Feel Your Love Tonight from the Dave era. From the Sam era, you want to really listen to Summer Nights, Top of the World, stuff like that. When It's Love, you can really hear those thick background vocals. And yes, Mike is prominent, but he's not the only one. There's a blend there. And of course, Dave was in the mix when it came to his time, and Sam was doing some background vocals too, as well, during that time. In terms of the producers, that's a good question, I mean, it wasn't just Ted in the production studio. Sammy only worked with Ted on the vocals for the For Unlawful Carnal Knowledge album. 5150, he's there working with Mick Jones. Then he's working with Don Landy on OU812, and then he's working with Bruce Fairbairn for Balance. So I don't know how much Ted was involved. Ted was heavily involved with obviously all the Dave albums, with the exception of A Different Kind of Truth. So I don't know, Dave, what do you think?
I'm not sure which way to go on that, to be honest with you. The more I think about it, the more my head hurts. I mean, the whole background vocal thing we already spoke about.
Yeah. Letter number 13 comes from Cactus Pete Martins from Mesa, Arizona. And he says here, what an awesome interview you did with Jesse Harms. Very interesting to hear from someone who's worked with both Dave and Sam and so many others. What is the song that plays at the end of the pod? And it starts out with what I assume to be the intro to Take Me Back Deja Vu. Lastly, my daughter's taking guitar lessons, attaches a picture of her Christmas present. Keep up the awesome podcast. Happy New Year, guys. Cactus Pete Martins from Mesa, Arizona. Okay, so now the song at the end of the pod, No More Waiting, for sure. Unreleased Van Halen track. The intro was used as a acoustic bass for Take Me Back Deja Vu from the 1995 Balance album. Here's a clip of that. And then here's a clip of the intro to No More Waiting.
Let's hear it for Edward.
The rest of the song is different. If you listen back to that tune, it could have been a single, really. I still say Take Me Back sounds like a Sammy Hagar solo tune. There's something about that song that reminds me of Sammy's solo tune. It doesn't sound so much like a Van Halen song. Dave, what do you think?
Really? That's interesting.
I said that on the Balance episode. You don't remember that?
I'm lucky I remember what I had for breakfast. Are you kidding me? Come on now. Come on now.
Early dementia setting in.
I know. I'm sunsetting at night. But the interesting part for me is that song that we played at the end, which had the intro to what would be Take Me Back.
Yeah.
I would have loved to have heard that as a full-fleshed out Van Halen song.
Yeah.
Like something on A Different Kind of Truth.
Yeah.
Yeah, that would have been cool, because that intro that Ed does is so different than the rest of the song. I agree that when they used it for Take Me Back, it definitely fit better with that song.
Oh, yeah.
I think maybe Ed had fleshed it out. But I really would have loved to hear, I forget what that song was. What song was it? Was that No More Waiting?
Yes, No More Waiting. Yeah.
Okay. Mm-hmm. Okay, yeah. That I would have loved to have heard that in a clean, finished version. That would have been awesome.
I wonder if he stayed away because he used the intro for Take Me Back.
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah.
Maybe.
Yeah.
I wonder. No, but honestly, he totally could have done a different intro to that. Because remember, they did She's the Woman, and they already used the bridge for I think it was Mean Street.
Right.
And they just wrote a new bridge.
That's true.
So I don't think, right? So
That's
I don't think
true.
that would have been a problem if they really wanted to use the song.
That's
I think maybe they were just like, yeah, well, the song's all right, but we've got other songs to do. And Cactus Pete, congratulations on your daughter taking guitar lessons.
Yeah.
That's awesome. I hope she rocks it out, my man.
That's awesome. Letter number 14 comes from Irish Alan Cullen, living in the UK, the Van Halen desert. He says here, hi, loud used car salesman Dave and sensible accountant Dave. Oh,
well, that's probably...
God.
For me,
yeah.
the most accurate description of me yet.
Yeah, great. That's exactly you. And then I'm loud used car salesman Dave. Wow.
Well, I didn't say it was an accurate description of you.
We got beautiful Acuras this afternoon. Buy one, get one free. All right, so listen. He says here, one will be redundant by the time the next show comes around, but it makes me chuckle. Mr. Big are ready to unveil their new drummer. One suggestion on Planet Rock's Twitter account was, let it be Alex Van Halen. Not that this would ever happen, but how cool would it be if Billy and Al were playing together? Anyhow, keep up the fantastic work and good luck on the pod for 2023. Maybe we'll get a Van Halen box set. Oh my God. From Irish Alan Cullen, living in the UK, the Van Halen desert. Okay, well, I don't ever see Al being a replacement drummer. If he's gonna do something beyond Van Halen, which could be, I think he might put together like a supergroup. Something like Al with John Paul Jones on bass, Tony Iommi on guitar, and then some sort of killer singer to go on top of that. I could see maybe him doing a project like that, maybe doing a handful of shows, maybe something like that, because it doesn't look like the Van Halen thing is going to happen. So maybe that's the way he goes. A replacement drummer, I don't see that happening. Dave, what do you think?
Yeah, I don't think he'll be a replacement drummer.
Yeah.
I don't even think he'll even do what you'll suggest. I think if he can't do a tribute to Ed, I don't think he'll do anything.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that's sad.
Yeah. Look, he only really ever played with his brother. He's never done any side project.
Nothing.
On his own.
Yeah.
He's never played live on his own.
Right.
Without Ed. Maybe he played outside of Van Halen once and Ed was with him. You know, he's just really very loyal to his brother and the band. And I think he's at a point in his life now, too, where he's like, you know what, if I can't play with Ed, I'm just not playing anymore.
Yeah.
Really, this is just my opinion.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
You know, if anybody wants to know, you'd have to ask the man himself. You have to ask Al. But my opinion, I think that's just where he is right now. Playing drums is hard, and playing drums when you're older is harder. And maybe Al's just like, you know what, it was a good ride. I'm done. I'm just going to do my own thing, going to raise horses and drive nice cars, and that's where he is right now.
Well, then I have a question for you. If Jimmy Page and John Paul Jones call him up, does he go?
I think he'll take the call.
But you know how much Al, Al loves Led Zeppelin.
Well, will he entertain the discussion? Yeah, but you're talking about a bunch of people who can never seem to get anything done together. So from that standpoint, Al will fit in with them just fine. Really? Because like the Led Zeppelin can't seem to decide, are we going to get together? We're not going to get together. Are we going to play? And then the whole thing just dissolves anyway. Right?
That's the truth.
So from that standpoint, sure, Al will join them in doing nothing. I think that will happen. Okay. That's what I think will happen.
Okay, letter number 15 comes from Brad Martell. And he says, Happy New Year, Dave and Dave. It's been about a year since I wrote in, so you may not remember me. I'm Brad Van Halen 3 Martell. And I call myself that because Van Halen 3 is one of my top Van Halen albums, even more so now that many worst album lists have come out saying it destroyed the band's reputation. Anyhow, my question is this. About 3 hours and 24 minutes into the Jesse Harms interview, he mentions that Chad Smith played on Marching to Mars, Sammy's album from 1997. But I've checked the credits, and I can't see his name anywhere. Is there a bonus track I don't know about, or is Jesse mistaken? Thanks, guys. Brad Martell. Well, if you remember, Brad, on the last mailbag segment, we had a question for Jesse, and Jesse answered the question directly. So I went back to the well, and I emailed Jesse, and being the nice, kind-hearted man that he is, he gave us a unique response. So this is directly from Jesse himself. Dave and Dave, oops, it wasn't Chad Smith, it was Matt Sorum who played on Kama on the Marching to Mars CD. I should have checked the credits because there are lots of facts mishmashed in my memory. I guess I thought it was Chad because he jammed with us a couple of times in Cabo. I can't remember why Denny Carmassi didn't play on that song. I think it was one of the last ones we cut and he had already packed up. He said, sorry for the confusion, Jesse Harms. So there you go, Brad, directly from the horse's mouth. It was Matt Sorum from Guns N' Roses, who played on Kama. It was not Chad Smith. That was a correction there. So there you go, directly from Jesse Harms himself. Dave, what do you have to say about that?
Isn't Jesse the nicest guy?
Oh, he's ridiculous. He's the best. He's a nice man.
Because we're like Columbo knocking on his door going, excuse me, one more thing.
Yeah, I know.
Right?
Cool.
And he's always very gracious and
Such a
answers any question we throw at him.
Yeah,
so thank you, Jesse.
We
really appreciate it. Now, to our listeners out there, don't all start writing in with like a whole Q&A for Jesse.
Yeah, I know,
because
right?
we don't want to abuse the privilege, okay?
That's right,
so
exactly. We can't go crazy.
Don't get greedy,
That's right. And letter number 16, the last letter of the night, Dave's absolutely favorite time, is from Babbleman. And he says here, I just want to say thanks for all your hard work you both do on this podcast. I have a thought on Van Halen 3. I remember back in the MTV days when I saw an interview with Eddie, he was asking about what music he likes to listen to. His response was he didn't follow any music, but he was just into making his own, but he did say he only bought one album, and the album he bought was Peter Gabriel's So. So, my thought on Van Halen 3 is Eddie really liked Peter Gabriel's So album, and I think it influenced him on making Van Halen 3. I have listened to Peter Gabriel's So album, and it's kind of similar to Van Halen 3 to me. It's hard to get through that whole album. So to sum up my thought, I think Eddie was influenced a lot by Peter Gabriel's music, and it shows in Van Halen 3. Any thoughts on this idea on Van Halen 3? Babbleman. Well, Babbleman, I will tell you this. Yes, Eddie was infatuated with So by Peter Gabriel, rightfully so, because that album is a classic. It's an all-time classic. The songs on there are amazing. The production is amazing. Probably one of Peter Gabriel's all-time best, for sure. That's undoubtedly. It's an artistic achievement. So for Eddie to enjoy that is understandable. I will say, in regards to Van Halen 3, there is one song on there that comes right from the vein of So, and that is the song called Once. And here is a clip of that song. Well, a lot of people nickname Van Halen 3 the Eddie Van Halen solo album that wasn't labeled an Eddie Van Halen solo album. And I tend to agree with that more and more as time goes on. And we learn Mike was only on 3 songs, Alec was only on 3 songs, and Ed was playing more instruments than we thought. This song really is Eddie trying to do a Peter Gabriel song. It really has that flavor. I happen to love Once. I think it's really cool. There's also a cool remix of Once that's out there. And if you can find it on YouTube, there's an interesting video on Once as well. I like this song. I think it's experimental. I think it's cool. The only other song that I could say might have a little bit of a Peter Gabriel feel is From Afar. That's another one that has a little bit of it. Here's a clip of that.
If I cannot see you from afar, look into your eyes that hint of death. hidden inside. If I cannot hear you from afar, whisper in my ear, rest assured that you are near. And I know about what it's like, the aforementioned, for the distance between us, as all the stars, I only have you in my imagination, in my imagination, just to love you from afar.
I'm a big fan of that song, too. I happen to like the different experimental things that Ed did here. But the thing is that these don't sound like Van Halen songs. That's the thing when you're in a band like Van Halen. People come to you for a specific vibe and flavor. And when you don't deliver that vibe and flavor, people get upset because they're used to a certain brand. And that's kind of what he dealt with. Also, the timing. Timing is everything in life, as the expression goes. And 1998 was not the time to start experimenting with your brand. So, listen, you go to a third singer, you start experimenting. The timing of 1998, you don't get a producer that's a big name that's been working with, you're getting risky. You have less Michael Anthony on the album, less Alex Van Halen on the album, and, it becomes a little lost in the sauce. But I do think Once is a great song. I really enjoy it. It's just not a Van Halen song. It's a cool experimental Eddie Van Halen song. I don't think it's a Van Halen song, but, obviously it was branded one, so I can't say that it's not, but at the same time, it doesn't sound like one. But I do feel the Peter Gabriel vibe on that. Dave, what do you think?
I'm not that familiar with the So album. I did listen to it a few months ago from beginning to end for the first time in a long time. I guess there is somewhat of a indirect influence.
Right.
I don't think Ed was in there going, I'm going to make an album like So.
No.
But yeah, I think in terms of experimenting, he was like that. Although I will say, I think So is probably one of Peter Gabriel's more commercial albums because his other ones tend to be a little more
trippy. Yeah.
Yeah. Great word. I was going to say out there, but yeah. Exactly. So I think it's kind of ironic that if Ed was like, I'm going to make an album like So to be a little more experimental, that was really Peter Gabriel's closest thing to a popular album that he ever made. But yeah, either way, I agree with you, Dave. Van Halen 3 was the closest we ever got to an Ed solo album. And he just wanted to try new things. And no one was going to say he was wrong at the time because he'd really been, batting 1,000 every other time before that. And this was really his first major swing and a miss musically. But as Dave and I said before, that's because he didn't have anybody around him telling him what was a good idea and what was a bad idea.
Yeah.
He didn't have a lead singer who had the same gravitas or ego as Ed did, and he didn't have a strong enough producer to challenge him. Not challenge him like you're wrong, but say, hey, do you want to rethink this option or you want to try that? And really try like a team effort to make the best album they can make.
Right.
It felt like at that point, Ed really wanted it to be the Ed show. So, pardon the pun, and that's also one of my favorite safety words if you listen to this podcast with any form of regularity.
Right.
So Ed said, I'm going to find a producer who will listen to me and a lead singer who will listen to me. I really think that Ed wanted to make the album he wanted to make, period. Was it successful? I don't think it was as successful as you do, and I'll leave it at that.
I never called it successful. I just think it was the wrong time, wrong statement. But, I just think 98 was a rough time in general, number one. Now, like I said before, you start experimenting with your brand, and you're on your third singer. I think that's just very rough. But anyway, so that wraps up the mailbag segment. And
And we are on to our in-depth discussion on the Wildlife soundtrack. So Dave and I, in celebration of Ed's birthday, which would have been his 68th birthday, we're doing a deep dive on the Wildlife soundtrack, which was the soundtrack that Ed did for the movie The Wildlife, which was sort of like a Fast Times at Ridgemont High style high school comedy. But interesting stuff here. There's a lot of Van Halen tidbits in the recordings because a lot of those songs ended up spinning off into Van Halen songs. So we're going to get into all that, and that's all coming up next. Take a listen.
I'm the happiest guy in the world, and if you ever see me bummed out, it's because of that damn Dave did it.
Most comparisons between Hagar's reality and mine are purely coincidental. I make the joke frequently that my life and my career is a lot like Capitol Hill or your favorite Chinese restaurant. You probably don't want to see what's going on behind the scenes.
Pick up the new coffee table-sized book, The Decade That Rocked, by legendary rock photographer Mark Weiss. This 376-page book has hundreds and hundreds of full-color photos that Weiss shot through the 80s for magazines like Circus, Faces, and Hit Parader, featuring bands like Van Halen, Motley Crue, Twisted Sister, Bon Jovi, Skid Row, Guns N' Roses, Ozzy Osbourne, and more. There's even behind-the-scenes stories to go with these colorful, eye-popping pictures. The Decade That Rocked, a new book by rock photographer Mark Weiss, is available for purchase now. Go to thedecadethatrocked.com, where there are exclusive bundles available with extra prints, t-shirts, and even patches. Inquire about the Van Halen bundle, especially made for Dave and Dave Unchained listeners. Order today. The Decade That Rocked. It'll rock your world. Hello, loyal listeners. Wanted to let you know about our new Patreon. If you like what we do and you have the means, drop us a donation to keep the podcast going. Go to patreon.com/DD Unchained. That's patreon.com/DDUNCHAINED. Any size contributions are greatly appreciated. We have special packages to those who donate $45 or more. You'll get the Unchained package. Trust me, it's worth it. Contribute $65 or more and you can get the Romeo Delight package, which is Unchained plus more. $95 or more scores you the Top Jimmy package, which is the kitchen sink. If you're a Van Halen hardcore and listen to this cast, this is stuff you'll appreciate. It's ear candy. Those who want one of the packages simply email ddunchainedpodcast@gmail.com. That's ddunchainedpodcast@gmail.com to make arrangements. What is understood need not be discussed. The long-awaited Van Halen book from legendary rock journalist Steve Rosen is almost here. Tone Chaser, Understanding Edward, my 26-year journey with Edward Van Halen. This is an over 400-page odyssey of Rosen's decades interviewing and being friends with the late guitar god, Eddie Van Halen. Rosen says, I spent 14 long, hard months writing Tone Chaser. It was both the most difficult story I've ever written and the most rewarding. I wanted to be honest and transparent as I possibly could, which was not always an easy thing to do. In the end, this was the most complete and comprehensive book I could have possibly written. There was nothing left to say when I reached the last page. With every word I wrote, I was reminded of the time I spent with Edward, and that hurt terribly. But it also brought back what a remarkable experience that was, and how insanely lucky I had been to have ever known him, and astonishingly to have been friends with him. I hope you can feel everything I felt. That is the purpose of this book. Pre-sales are currently going on now for the self-published book. PayPal Steve directly at scrosen@sbcglobal.net. That's scrosen@sbcglobal.net. It's $47 for those who are buying it inside the U.S., and that includes shipping. $95 for those who are buying it overseas, and that includes shipping. Tone Chaser, Understanding Edward, my 26-year journey with Edward Van Halen. Don't miss out. Order it today.
Hey, this is Vince Steele of Motley Crue, and you're listening to Dave and Dave on Unchained. Right on, man.
If you would like to send us a letter asking a question or making a statement or whatever you'd like to say, you can send it to ddunchainedpodcast@gmail.com.
Martin Popoff here. Hope you're enjoying this latest episode of Dave and Dave Unchained, the wise swamis on all things VH. Just wanted to remind you that at martinpopoff.com, I've got 2 Van Halen books that I wrote. One is Van Halen, a visual biography, which is basically a big hardcover coffee table book, 400 images, 20,000 word detailed timeline. And the other one is called Unchained, a Van Halen user manual. It's the sort of 120,000 word, very academic, a lot of crazy chapters, a lot of trivia, wordy book that I did on Van Halen. So yes, go to martinpopoff.com. I sign and ship those out of my office here in Toronto. There's PayPal buttons for the US, international, and Canada. Again, Van Halen, a visual biography, and Unchained, a Van Halen user manual. Back to Dave and Dave.
Hey folks, I'd like to introduce you to the Classic Rock Album by Album podcast. Welcome to the Classic Rock Album by Album podcast, where no stone is left unturned in the show's epic quest to review and dissect every single rock album ever made. Join self-proclaimed rock authorities Chris Carson and Lee Bowie on their epic journey to uncover the true classics. You can find the Classic Rock Album by Album podcast wherever podcasts can be found, including Spotify, Stitcher, Apple Podcasts, and Google Podcasts. Our website address is classicrockalbumbyalbum.libsyn.com. That's LIBSYN.com. And we can be reached on Facebook at fb.me/Classic Rock Album by Album. See you soon from the Classic Rock Album by Album podcast.
When you're talking about outlaws and good guys, bad guys, you're talking about image. And of course, in show business, they always say an ounce of image is worth a pound of performance. On the other hand, you think, who would you rather go to dinner with, Louis Pasteur or Jesse James?
All right, Dave. Well, we figured since it's the first episode of the year, and that obviously falls on the month of Eddie Van Halen's birthday, it might be time to put the spotlight on Eddie on a very special project he did in 1984 called The Soundtrack for the Wildlife. Now, this is not the traditional soundtrack, the one that they sell in the stores and have the hit songs on. This is actually the movie score. Interesting thing about this is Eddie is all over the film. His music is all over the film. And the funny thing is, the songs on the soundtrack, a lot of them are not even in the movie. So this is during 1984, where soundtracks are a big seller in the record stores. You know, movie scores don't really sell. But the real surprising thing about this is Eddie scored this whole movie. There's probably, I'm going to say, over 15 pieces of music in this movie. And it is still today, in 2023, not available to the public, which is absolutely shocking, considering the fact that it's Eddie Van Halen, number one, and number two, you know, it's not like Eddie's done tons of scores. This is the only one he's really done for movies. He's done a TV movie, we'll get into that, but this is something that is a mystery in the Van Halen camp. Why is this score not available? Now, it is available via bootleg. I bought a bootleg from Japan, which I shared with Dave, and we're going to be talking about the different pieces of music from the movie, and we're going to talk a little bit about the movie too. So now the interesting thing is The Wildlife. Many of you probably don't even know what the hell this movie is. Well, it wasn't a really big hit. It came out in September of 1984. It is sort of what they call a not direct, but a spiritual sequel to 1982's Fast Times at Ridgemont High. It was written and produced by Cameron Crowe, who wrote Fast Times at Ridgemont High. He didn't direct it. That was directed by Amy Heckling. So now, Fast Times at Ridgemont High was a hit. It was a big hit. It was constantly quoted. It's known as a comedy classic. This is sort of a cheap ripoff of that movie, even though it's written by the same person. Now, not only is it a cheap ripoff, it stars Chris Penn, which is Sean Penn's brother. He's actually passed on. He's no longer with us. And he plays a character that's similar to Sean Penn's character in Fast Times at Ridgemont High, Jeff Spicoli. He has this sort of like, goofy, sort of blonde, dim-witted guy, but he's charismatic and funny, that kind of thing. This movie is high school without the high school, whereas Fast Times, it was very, very high school. It was like the beginning of high school. This is the summer before high school starts again for the semester. They also have some characters that are out of school already, but very, very similar tropes here that they would do, trying to imitate things. Chris Penn's character has a catchphrase that he says over and over again throughout the movie, saying, "It's casual." Almost like Jeff Spicoli saying, "Hey, bud, let's party." It drips of the 80s, really does. This is sort of a lame attempt at recreating Fast Times. Now, the funny thing about Fast Times is, apparently Cameron Crowe wanted Eddie to score Fast Times. But for some reason, there was a lack of communication between their representatives, and it didn't happen. But Crowe paid tribute to Van Halen in Fast Times at Ridgemont High, if you remember. Number one, we've talked about this before. Timon scalps the Van Halen tickets to the kids in the mall. That's at the beginning of the movie. And at the end of the movie, when Jeff Spicoli, they say what happened to him. And he says Jeff Spicoli saved Brooke Shields from drowning. And he spends his reward money having Van Halen play at his birthday party. So obviously little nods to Van Halen there. But this movie, like I say, has Chris Penn in it, Eric Stoltz, Leah Thompson, Rick Moranis, Randy Quaid. The funny thing is about this is Eric Stoltz and Leah Thompson star in this movie as boyfriend and girlfriend. They were supposed to star in Back to the Future next, but Eric Stoltz, who was originally Marty McFly in Back to the Future, got fired. Even after filming the movie for 6 weeks. They were almost done filming with that movie, and they threw everything out in order to put in Michael J. Fox because Eric Stoltz was playing it more of a serious character as opposed to a comedic way. And they had some issues getting Michael J. Fox because of his contracts with Family Ties, and it ended up not working out for Eric Stoltz, but it ended up working out for the movie in a better way. So it's kind of funny to see that these two were playing opposite each other in a film when they were supposed to be as son and mother in Back to the Future, which is the next year. So anyway, Eddie Van Halen plays all the instruments here. It says in the movie credits, with engineer Don Landy producing, but it also says that the music is done by Don Landy too, which is kind of strange. I don't know if that's a mistype in the movie or not, but Don Landy and Eddie did this project together. Now, Eddie did this score in a very small break while on Van Halen's 1984 tour, and while he was doing that break, that's when David Lee Roth was doing Crazy from the Heat, which is interesting because they were doing separate things at that time. The movie hit the movie theaters on September 28th, 1984. The film was done in a very quick way, and it was a bomb. It only made $11 million, and surprisingly, on the soundtrack, it only had one piece of music from Eddie Van Halen. So the song Donut City, which was a place that Leah Thompson works at in the movie. She works at like a Dunkin' Donuts, but it's called Donut City. There's that song in the score, and it's one of the most prominent ones there. But the rest of the score has never been officially released, like I said. But if you search it, you can find there's a place, I think, called CD Japan or something like that, that sells the bootleg. Interesting enough, the score ended up being sort of a demo for future Van Halen songs. There's bits and pieces of Good Enough, AFU, Feel So Good, Blood and Fire, and Right Now in the movie. Now, they're not exact. You can feel hints of them in the songs, but you can see like Sammy has said in the past, that Ed would come up with some music and he would pull some stuff out and make a song with it. So you can see certain pieces and hooks that he would take and use for those songs that I just mentioned. This was kind of an interesting time for Ed, too, because he was doing a score for a TV movie at the time for Valerie called The Seduction of Gina. And now the interesting thing was the band is kind of on shaky grounds. And it's almost like Ed was forging a path for himself, a career for himself in film scoring. I'll tell you why. There was a trend in the early 80s with rockers who were no longer with their bands going to score movies. Like, for example, in 1981, Rick Wakeman from the band Yes, he did the score for The Burning. In 1982, Jimmy Page from Led Zeppelin did the score for Death Wish 2, the Charles Bronson movie. And then in 1983, Stuart Copeland of the Police did the score for Rumblefish. And of course, this is all coming towards the end of their time in their bands, which is really kind of wild. If you think about it, Ed had just built 5150 at home. Val really didn't want him going out on the road. They wanted to start a family. So he already did The Seduction of Gina for Val's TV movie. You could see he was almost setting himself up for possibly doing film scoring here. Dave, what do you think of that whole angle?
That is interesting because it was a crazy time when he was scoring this movie. Like you pointed out, he was like right in the middle of a tour.
Yeah.
You know, he had just finished making 1984, the album, where they had spent quite a bit of time making it, more than usual. And he had built the 5150 studio on his property. You can never fault Ed for his work ethic. It was one thing after the other. And then this opportunity comes along for him to score his movie. And he's like, yeah, sure, what the heck, he'll do it. And you're right about it being a really, really tight deadline. In fact, he had recorded what he had to record, and then he gave it to Don Landy and said, all right, here, you finish it up because I got to go on tour.
Right.
So Don produced it and whatever else he had to do to get it in the movie. You know, I guess Ed wanted to be a part of that, but he just couldn't because he was off to, I think it was off to Europe for that part of the massive 1984 tour.
Right, exactly. Now remember, he works beautifully with Don. He has a home studio, no lead singers, no manager, no producers, no deadline. Everything is done himself. It's kind
of...
Well,
there was a deadline. There was a very...
No. Excuse me. Of course, there's always deadlines to everything anybody does. I meant like, you know, the looming pressure of like a Van Halen deadline. Like, you remember, he dealt with a very intense deadline with 1984. The reason I meant that was, maybe I phrased that the wrong way, meaning like a Van Halen release had an impact on Warner Brothers' quarter. A score to a movie, you're paid a fee to do the score, and that's it. He doesn't have to worry about charts. He doesn't have to worry about singles. He doesn't have to worry about videos. He doesn't have to worry about album sales. He's paid.
I get you.
You see what I'm saying?
1984, yeah. So 1984, or a Van Halen album, is a highly visible project. It's a highly visible album.
Yeah.
And Van Halen at that time was notorious for banging out an album a year. In fact, 1984 technically, well, obviously it came out in 84, so it was a little later. So this soundtrack, I mean, I think at the time, like, it certainly wasn't publicized at the time that Ed had done the soundtrack.
No. You'd have to be a real nerd like us to really know. Yeah, you're like, for example, the only hit that came off this album was the title track, The Wildlife by Bananarama, which was a, you know, kind of an MTV hit and a fun, airy kind of song, which is fine. There's no problem with that. But it's just when Van Halen got to the level of 1984, you got to realize the pressure and the intensity that goes along with that. The radio promotion, the video promotion, making videos, picking singles, charts. It becomes more than just touring and making an album. It becomes running a corporation, and it just becomes overwhelming. Like, all of that would be washed away, and he could work in his backyard with his buddy Don and do film scores and still do music for a living. living. So, with the band falling apart, it's almost like he was creating a little path for himself. You know what I'm saying? Because, Ed, he always says, I don't want to be a rock star. I just want to be a musician, and I want to make music for a living. And I'm not saying he was totally hanging it up. But at the time, Val wanted him home more. One of the biggest contentions of breaking up with Dave was that he said apparently in that conversation, the famous conversation that they had at Dave's house, where they kind of broke up or whatever you want to call it, was that they wanted to tour less. They wanted to do a bunch of stadium shows and sort of kind of knock it out that way, and Dave was not down with that. Dave was in a different place. And remember this, too. Everybody says stuff about Dave going off and doing Crazy from the Heat. This is the umpteenth project Eddie's doing outside the band. Like, he did Beat It with Michael Jackson, and he also did the Starfleet project with Brian May, and he's doing this. So, you have to realize, but Dave, now remember, in all, fairness, Dave was also doing Crazy from the Heat on a high level, like a regular release, with big videos, going on David Letterman, cover Rolling Stone, tons of interviews, tons of press. Like, Eddie wasn't doing that. So in his defense, he wasn't doing that. And, Dave had MTV's attention. He had a movie offer. Everything was falling at his feet. They kind of parted in that way. Dave, what did you make of the whole Wildlife project? And also, what was your impression of it at the time? When did you even become aware of it?
I don't think I became aware of it till years after the movie had come out.
Okay.
I certainly didn't see it the first time. And full disclosure, I'm not even sure I've seen the movie from beginning to end. I mean, I listened to the music, but after reading about the movie, I wasn't like, I'm missing a diamond in the rough. That wasn't the case. But yeah, it was basically a teenage 80s cash-in movie is what it was. I mean, interestingly, the stars of the movie, a lot of them went to bigger and better things. I mean, there's some big names in that movie, but it was before they were famous. So it just didn't gel, whatever you want to say.
Truth is, it wasn't funny. It really wasn't fucking funny.
Well, there you go. If you're putting out a teenage comedy and it's not funny.
No.
And certainly there were other movies at that time. I mean, John Hughes was putting out a movie a year, and that guy could do no wrong. I mean, rightfully so, because he made really good movies that struck a chord with teens at the time.
Right.
And, if you're not reaching that bar, you're not going to get very far.
That's true.
But, like you said, the soundtrack that was released didn't do all that well. It was that kind of sort of Bananarama hit. I mean, you had mentioned earlier that you were surprised that, knowing that Eddie had actually done the soundtrack work to the movie, why it was never released. I'm less surprised than you are, because when it comes to Van Halen, somebody might have asked to put that out on, say, a small label or something like that, because you see that a lot with older movies now. They come out with these really small batches, for lack of a better term. Hey, we're going to put the soundtrack out, the actual soundtrack of the movie out. We're going to limit it to a few thousand copies on vinyl or CD, and the really crazy fans of the movies are the ones buying it, because they're finally getting the background music without the movie sounds in there, and they go crazy, which people like you and me would buy for this in a heartbeat. But that was something that was never on Ed's radar. I could just hear him saying, well, who would be interested in that? Who cares, right?
Yeah,
So, for Ed, it was just an interesting project. He did it, and then, obviously, he moved on.
They're also not very polished. So you have to realize they're sort of in rough demo form, because he really banged them out. It works absolutely fine with the movie, but he might be a little leery in putting out an album, for sale on it, because it really is sort of a rough mix. You know what I mean?
Right. And that's certainly what we've heard in the bootleg. I think the source of that bootleg might be the recordings that are on YouTube now, which originally saw the light of day, if I'm remembering correctly, on the Van Halen news desk.
Right, yeah. Remember, I think it was maybe about 10 years ago when they started
It might have been that long,
highlighting roughly about there. What do you make of the fact, Dave, that this became sort of a well for Van Halen songs, and how many Van Halen hooks? This was was almost like a demo tape for, like, Van Halen songs. What did you make of that?
Oh, yeah, because at the time you're listening to Ed play songs and you're like, okay, yeah, fine, whatever. But then you go back and listen to it 20 years later and you hear the seeds, or not even the seeds. Sometimes you hear like the whole song almost of songs that came out later and you're like, oh, Ed totally had some ideas and he put him in the soundtrack of the movie. And then he went back to the band and said, hey, I've got these musical bits. Let's flesh them out and make a song with vocals. It's always fun when you go back and you go, hey, wait a minute. That's from, whatever album or something like that. So that's crazy when you can go back and be like, I didn't hear it the first time because nobody realized what it was. And now after all this time, there's a handful of songs that he had recorded at that time and put in the movie that were legitimate Van Halen songs later.
Yeah. And I will also say the bootleg that Dave and I got is missing a couple of pieces. So, 2 very important ones and a couple of small ones. They're so small that you can't even talk about them because they're like seconds long. However, we're going to start with the first one, which is very familiar to all of us, called Ripley. It's about 3 minutes and 12 seconds. Now, remember this. Some of these are like full songs. Some of them are not. Like, there's one's 3 minutes, one's 7 minutes, one's 3:40, then one's 30 seconds, one's 1 minute and 25 seconds. So, like, they're all different lengths, because you gotta remember, he's scoring a movie, right? He's not writing just songs, but there's a lot of real hidden gems in here we're gonna go over with you. So, the first one, as we will know, is Ripley. It's about 3 minutes and 12 seconds, and here's a clip. As you can tell, you're recognizing Blood and Fire from A Different Kind of Truth from 2012, so many years later.
Always tell the winners, saints and the sinners down at the starting line. I'm a lucid vision, be unforgiven. I'm your wave-tossed guy. Inside we were touching, trouble by the dozen. Stakes have never been high. Come back when you're younger, 'cause I can feel the thunder. 1-800, it's time.
You can see the intro is right there. This is a total basis for the song. It's left over from the 1984 sessions. Very poppy. You can see where the direction is going with it. Very upbeat, almost danceable in a way. Eddie Van Halen used his Ripley guitar in this, hence the name Ripley. Each string on the guitar can be set to different sides of the speaker through the use of the individual string pen pots. So now also, Eddie Van Halen is playing 2 different guitars here, layered on each other. He's playing drums, which is more electronic. All the drums on here are very electronic. Alex is not on here, just so you know. And you don't really hear any bass. I think a lot of bass that is used here is electronic keyboard bass, Dave, don't you think?
Yeah, I definitely think there's some synth bass going on there.
Yeah.
Or, I mean, if Ed's playing, it's certainly not in the forefront of the mix.
Right, that's for sure. What did you make of this song, Dave, Ripley? This is one of the better ones.
It is. It's one of the ones that are more fleshed out.
Right.
I mean, it's obviously the basis for Blood and Fire, but I think out of all the songs, it's really the one that you can hear the most in the current version of the song. It wasn't like, oh, there's bits and pieces. Like, it's really the song. They fleshed it out. They updated it. Dave put some vocals on there. Yep. But the body of the song is basically the same.
That's true. And the second one here is simply called Good Enough. And it's 7 minutes and 29 seconds. This is a long jam. Here's a clip. So now this starts out very summery and a kind of a simmering, vibey jam, and then it kind of creates sort of a bed for the original song, Good Enough. This is the first song that Sammy wrote with Ed. So this piece of music might be one of the first pieces of music Ed played for Sam that they wrote a song from. Eddie gives himself a lot of space and air in this theme here. The guitars don't start to really take off until about 3 minutes in, like right here. We got some Eddie goodness in there. He starts ripping and he starts grooving all over the place. This song is not exactly like the 5150 tune, but elements of it are certainly there. The bass is there, and there's parts of the song that are used for Good Enough. It also gives you a flavor of what Sammy pulled out. You know what I mean? He got some of these things and created a song with it. Clearly, this is definitely, like I said, one of the first for Sam. And apparently, David Lee Roth heard this one while rehearsing for the next album before they broke up. Right, Dave?
Yeah, it was definitely one of those songs they had started to work on before Dave left. How far along they got with those songs is always the big question. Were there scratch vocals put on or not? We'll probably never know. But anyway, you could definitely hear the riff of Good Enough in this song. And you're right. It's interesting how Ed lays out this piece of music and how Sam and the rest of the band would turn it into a finished song later. Interestingly, you're right when you say Ed does rip on this song, because as we get to other songs, he doesn't rip. Right. But also, interestingly, you really don't hear the Brown sound all that much on this song or any of the other songs. Yeah. Even when Ed rips, there's not that Van Halen oomph, I'm going to call it, on these songs. Again, maybe it's the quality of the songs we're hearing.
Alex is not there.
You're right. You could definitely tell it's Al not on the drums.
Right.
But even just the guitar tone, I think Ed was, I don't know, obviously, but maybe Ed was just trying to tone it back a little bit because it was for a soundtrack.
That's true.
But anyway, it is interesting to hear the seeds of Good Enough in this song. You're right. It is a little longy.
Yeah.
It is a little jammy.
Yeah. And they use it in multiple places throughout the movie, so it's used more than once. The next song is Donut City. This is about 3 minutes and 40 seconds. This is the most polished and well-rounded song because it was put on the soundtrack. I went crazy as a kid for this because, to me, it was the first and only Eddie Van Halen solo track. And I went out and I remember buying the album on vinyl and listening to this over and over again because it was Eddie Van Halen's only solo track, which is kind of cool. This is the officially released song that's on the soundtrack, and technically it's really, I guess, the only official solo Eddie Van Halen song other than the porn tracks, but those aren't, I even think they're officially released, those songs. So this is interesting. Here's a clip of Donut City. Now, this song has the most coherent structure, less jammy or rough. It has this kind of dark underbelly groove that Ed plays over, and it's very much sort of a cruising tune. You can feel like you're cruising down this road in a convertible. I can actually hear this song being used on Eat 'Em and Smile. It has a similar vibe to Ladies' Night in Buffalo. It's got that down and dirty kind of late night vibe to it, and the soloing picks up at the end, but it fades out, which is a little upsetting to me. Dave, what did you think of Donuts? What did you think of Donuts?
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
That's true. I never thought about the Eat 'Em and Smile connection, but yeah, you're right. It does have a similar groove to Ladies' Night in Buffalo.
Yeah.
That's true.
Yeah.
You know, it's not a bad track. It's fine, but that's the issue with a lot of these tracks. They're fine, and that's all they are. If it wasn't for the fact that Ed had used quite a few of them later on other Van Halen songs, I mean, honestly, I don't know that we'd be as excited to be talking about it.
The most out of anything as to where Ed was in his life and the kind of music he was playing, and you can totally tell throughout this soundtrack that he's just really experimenting with the keyboards, big time. The next song is called Thin King, and it's only 30 seconds long, and here's a clip. Now, this one has the most balanced type of vibe. It has that 1995 balance, sort of in the second half of balance, kind of like Take Me Back. It's very quick. There's not much here, but it's very kind of light and stuff like that. Dave, what did you think of Thin King?
I don't even know what to say because it's like 30 seconds of Ed just doing whatever. And
right.
You know, by the time I was done even starting to think about it, the next song had started.
Right. That's the truth. There's not much to it.
Right.
That's true. The next one is called Fashion Dynasty, which is the name of one of the stores one of the kids works in the movie. It's 1 minute and 25 seconds. Very 80s. Here's a clip. This, you could tell, it's all keyboards. It's a sneaking around a mall type of scene. It's got that sort of very, very, very 80s generic feel to it. There's not much to this one. Dave, what do you think of Fashion Dynasty?
Yeah, that was the danger of Ed doing this soundtrack with the keyboard he had at the
Yeah.
time, because it was definitely that jump keyboard sound,
Yeah.
which is very much of its time.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, that's very 80s keyboard sound Ed had. So you could definitely pick the date of when this music came from. And Ed, he just loved that sound at the time.
Oh,
And
yeah.
you know, on all the keyboard type songs from this soundtrack, it's all over and he doesn't hold back.
That's true. The next song is really interesting. It's called Out the Window. And this song is very short. It is only 54 seconds long, but it's very important. Here's a clip. Now, the interesting thing about this song is it's a guitar-ripping track, but the coolest part about this thing is this is the music that was used in Back to the Future when Marty McFly dresses up as what he calls Darth Vader. He really wasn't Darth Vader, he was in a spacesuit, and he's scaring his father, George McFly, into asking his mom to the dance, and he put the Walkman on it, and he was blaring the Eddie Van Halen music to kind of freak him out.
Who are you?
Silence, Earthling! My name is Darth Vader. I am an extraterrestrial from the planet Vulcan.
Dave, you remember this scene?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
And I remember the first time I heard this piece of music, I was like, wait a minute.
Yeah.
I know that.
Yeah. This is
and
this
it was
piece.
Like, right. Because we had been looking for that little piece of music for years.
Yes.
It was like a mini revelation when this came out.
Right.
And we're like, wait a minute. It was in 2 movies?
Right. Now,
So,
and the funny thing is another Back to the Future connection because of, I told you before, Eric Stoltz and Leah Thompson, who star in this movie, were supposed to be in Back to the Future together. So it's kind of funny, like the Back to the Future references. But this song has Eddie ripping for about like 30 seconds. The rest is sort of drum beats. It's kind of cool and quick. It's a cool footnote because of the Back to the Future reference. But it's really to fill the scene and the people jumping out the window, and that was kind of the whole thing in the movie. But did you like this song, Dave?
Oh, well, I just thought the Back to the Future reference was just the coolest thing
Right.
about the song.
That's true. The next one is very familiar. It's called All Fired Up. It's about 6 minutes and 5 seconds long, and here's a clip. Now, this became the base for AFU Naturally Wired from 1988's OU812 Van Halen album. So kind of like Good Enough, it is not the exact song, but sort of the base to work from. The main riff is here, but you can still tell the parts were used to make the song. This is a taste of what Sam or Dave would get, in this case Sam, and that Ed would give them to use to work with, here's a piece of music, see if you can pull a song out of it type of thing. Remember that Dave and Ed, or Sam and Ed, would kind of shape a song together with the producer, with the engineer. Like, songs just don't come out. They're built. Ed makes a piece of music, gives it to Dave. Dave starts thinking about lyrics. He starts thinking about a melody, goes back to Ed. They work on a little more. The producer adds a little something in there. Maybe the engineer has an idea. Like, songs build and they form and they kind of come together. That's how that all happens. Seeing some of this, like, the basis for Good Enough, the basis for All Fired Up, it gives you a taste of what it's like before it becomes that song. So it's a little taste of that, Dave. What did you think of this song?
I like the way you describe it as a taste, because it's not as clean of a link as, say, Ripley to Blood and Fire.
Right.
Like that you hear right away.
Yeah.
This is really seedy. Like, you hear the seeds, but it's not quite the same song. It's one of those things where you're like, didn't they use that later? I think that's a song. What song is that?
You just feel the familiarity.
Right. Like, if they hadn't titled it All Fired Up, I really would have had to think about which song are they referencing.
Yeah.
Again, it's interesting how Ed had this riff or this idea and the band turned it into a full-fledged song, but something not quite the same as what Ed had in mind when he was doing the soundtrack.
Right. Now, this song has a lot of meat on the bone in terms of guitar, and it's very chunky, full of Eddie riffage. So this is one of the ones that is kind of a thicker, more of a substance to it. You know what I'm saying? Yeah.
Yes. I hear you.
The next one's another shorty. This one's called Peeping Tom. It's 1 minute and 1 second. Here's a clip. This one has some nice guitar crunch with bass and electronic drums. This is Ed clearly jamming in the studio over a beat he laid down. The bass, like I said, might even be synth bass here. He's just sort of quickly jamming. Again, this is a scene with the guy who plays the Jeff Spicoli wannabe, where he's kind of looking at his girlfriend getting dressed from outside the window. So it literally is a peeping Tom in the sense that he is a peeping Tom and his name is Tom. What did you think of this one, Dave?
Again, it's nice, it's pleasant, it's 1 minute long.
Right, yeah, it's very in and out. The next one is called Driving Song. This one's a little more lighthearted and upbeat kind of pop tune. It's got 2 minutes and 54 seconds here, and here's the clip. Very light and fluffy with electronic drums. This also has the seeds for Feels So Good, which has some keyboards in it there. can kind of get a sense of where he was heading for Feel So Good. Dave, what do you think of this one?
You know, I didn't quite hear the Feel So Good link there, but
okay.
Now that you say that, yeah, it's kind of, sort of.
It's a ghost, but it's not exact. It's not as close as All Fired Up or Good Enough. You could almost feel like he's feeling his way toward Feel So Good, like he's sort of getting there.
The sound or the tone. Yeah, well, not even the sound or the tone, because it still sounds like 1984 Keepers, but I get where you're going.
Yeah.
I get where you're going.
Yeah. There's another one here. This is sort of a quick filler. It's called Love Song. It's 1 minute and 12 seconds. Here's a clip. This is very light and kind of wispy. 2 layers of guitar here. One is kind of a melodic hook for soloing, and there's a little acoustic on here. There's no drums or bass. It's just called Love Song. It's kind of a quick moment, kind of a romantic scene in the movie, which they filled in with. What did you think of this one?
I really think it's very similar to the Driving Song, except it's just a slowed down version of it.
That's true.
It's kind of like the same, I don't know what you want to call it, the same notes or the same key progression. Like when I heard it, I'm like, wait a minute, I thought I heard this song before, and I had to go back to Driving Song. It's got like a similar structure. And like I said, it's like it just like slowed it down. You know, I guess it was trying to keep the themes of the song just at a different speed.
Right, absolutely. Next one is one of my favorites, Top Down, 3 minutes and 51 seconds. I think this is one of the best tunes that he did in the movie. Here's a clip. This is sort of a badass cruising song. It's got 2 guitars, one in the left ear, one in the right ear, and it really overrides the electronic bass and electronic drums that he has in the background. Total crunch fest here. It has a ZZ Top flavor, this song. It's the biggest taste, in my opinion, of what you'd get with an Eddie Van Halen solo album. I think this would give you the best peek into that, this song Top Down. Dave, what did you think of this one?
I would say it a little differently. I would say it's probably the most Van Halen sounding song that Ed did, because it's rocking, he's got the guitar going. If you want to hear Ed play guitar and you're trying, like, is he going to do anything old school? This is probably the closest you're going to hear to anything like that on this project.
The next one's real shorty, called Strike. Now, they work in a bowling alley, so that's part of the scene there. 52 seconds. Here's a clip. This is very short but tasty. It'll get going toward the end, but it really ends quicker than you expect. So it doesn't really sound like Ed. They must be using different guitars on this. This is the most that doesn't sound like Ed, this song. What do you think of this one?
Yeah, this is an example of like that muted guitar sound.
Yeah.
This
next one is called Seduction. Another shorty, 1 minute and 4 seconds. This is Ed sort of goofing around and noodling around. Here's a clip. He's sort of noodling all over the keyboards here. He's very kind of experimental. There's not a lot to this one, Dave. What did you think of this one?
Yeah, you're right. There's not a lot to it. So it's kind of hard to talk about songs that come and go. Again, it's interesting to hear him try things he normally doesn't do in a soundtrack setting. But it's nothing where I'm sitting here going, I'm going to be re-listening to this again and again.
Right. This last one, it's actually not the last one, but the last one on the bootleg is Back to School, which is 5 minutes and 10 seconds, is the end of the movie where they all go back to school. And here's a clip. Now, this sounds like a total 80s tune at the start, and he's playing keyboards in that jump mode, as you like to say. The guitars are kind of buried in the background. The main focus is the keyboards. This is just okay. It's nothing incredible. The last 30 seconds are the best part, where Ed brings the guitar to the forefront instead of the keys. Here's a clip of that. But it is sort of a brief moment that doesn't last too long. This runs over the credits of the movie, and that sort of wraps up the movie. However, we're going to get back to some other ones that I'll add in here. Dave, what did you think of Back to School?
You know what song I hear trying to come out of this is Dreams.
Really?
Yeah, I'm not saying the chords he's playing or the music he's playing is Dreams, because it's not. But I hear the keyboards and the sound and the textures and the tempo of the song. I'm like, it's almost like the bastard cousin of Dreams.
Wow.
Because he's trying to do like a keyboard thing and a guitar thing, which is Dreams. Like I said, it's kind of, sort of. He's experimenting. I mean, basically, this album is kind of like a blueprint for what he wants to do with the band on the next album.
Yeah, it's like a demo. It's really a demo of a lot of ideas. Like we said, the process of which Ed used to work was he would put a lot of music on tape, give it to Dave, give it to Sam, they take it back, they start writing lyrics, pulling out some melodies, come back to Ed, they reshape it together. Once they got it into some sort of formation, bring it to the producer, bring it to Don Landy, the engineer, they start rolling it over together, start trying it out, bring the band in, flesh it out. This is what they used to do. You have to realize these songs take a lot of goddamn work. There's a lot of layers to them. And like Sam says, sometimes they come quick and sometimes you labor over them. It's really crazy. So now there's 2 tracks that I want to go over that are not on this bootleg, but they were in the movie, and I taped them from the movie, so the sound is not going to be as clear, but it'll be clear enough for you to hear, and there's going to be some dialogue on it, so bear with it. So now this one, I have no titles for these because they don't really have titles. This one is really where Right Now came from, and this is just a clip in the movie, earlier on in the movie, and here's a clip of that.
Hey, Jim! Jim!
Hey, Tony, what's up?
How's it going?
All right.
Where have you been?
Just hanging out. All right. Not bad. At least you don't look like the flaming geek anymore.
Thanks. Hey, did you see Apocalypse Now on cable?
11 times.
So as you can hear, if you listen, there's sort of the thread line of right now in there with the keyboards. Ed was working on that piece for years. You remember, Right Now wasn't something he wrote in 1990 or 1991. The album came out in 91. I think they were recording it in 1990. He had that piece for a while. This is probably a piece he's been playing on the piano for a while, but this is something that was used in the movie. Dave, did you recognize this?
Oh, yeah. I mean, the second I heard it, I was like, wow, there you go.
Yep.
There it is.
Yeah, that's it.
Right? If you're watching the movie and you hear that and you're a Van Halen fan, you can't miss it.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely. Now, this next piece is even more interesting, or I should say just as interesting. This is a piece that's in the movie where this kid is lying down on the street as a protest to prevent a car from moving and this and that. The interesting part of this piece is, here's the clip of it, and I'll tell you the whole story. There's no name to it, so here's the clip.
Come on, Brenda, let's go back to my place.
I don't want to go now. My friends are in there.
Forget your friends.
Well, then I have to go home.
Don't worry, I'll get you home. Get in the car.
I don't want to go.
I said get in the car.
An army kid again. Oh my god.
I'm gonna rub his ass.
Eddie, go! Shut up! Grow up, and nobody likes you.
Is she laughing?
No.
Now, this is an instrumental piece that David Lee Roth used during his sword routine in the 1984 tour. Now remember, everybody took a solo in the 1984 tour, right? Well, you know, Mike had his bass solo, Eddie had his guitar solo, Alex had his drum solo, and Dave's solo was non-musical. It was him doing his sword routine. A lot of people complained about it, thought it took up too much time, dragged the show. But this piece is what Eddie, I don't know if he played it live, but it was played as Dave did his sword routine. As you can tell from the clip, it has that kind of daggering sort of jutting sound. This is from this movie. Again, it wasn't on the bootleg, but it was in the movie. Dave, what did you think of this song?
You know, I could just see everybody trying to negotiate their solo piece on the tour. And Dave's like, oh, I'm going to do my routine. And Ed's like, all right, whatever, do your sword routine.
Right.
And Dave was like, listen, I need some background music. You could do your keyboard thing and, you know, pick something. And so Ed was like, all right, well, I got this piece of music I was using for the soundtrack. I'll just throw that on. So I doubt, even to this day, that David Lee Roth realizes that music came from the Wildlife soundtrack.
Oh, you're probably right. Yeah, absolutely. I'm sure he's clueless about that. But if you look up Dave's sword routine, and in fact, here's a clip of it right now. Oh, you can see it on YouTube. You can see him do the routine, which is him basically with a sword. You know, Dave obviously studies the Japanese arts, very into that, and they have those traditional sword, I don't know what they're called. I'm calling them a routine. There's obviously a special name for them, but Dave loves that stuff, and he really started studying that stuff, and he started doing it in concert. The only problem is, you know, when you have all rock fans screaming, I don't know if it necessarily, like, satisfies the crowd's needs, but I guess they added a little music to it to make it a little more exciting with some lights and this and that, but that was what they used in 1984. So I wanted to tell you two things, Dave, about the movie as we wrap up here. Two cameos, rock and roll cameos, Dave, in the movie. One is sad and one is funny. One is sad is Nancy Wilson, who is Cameron Crowe's ex-wife. They were married at the time, or dating at the time. She plays in this sad scene where she realizes her husband is cheating on her, and her husband is a cop who's sleeping with this underage girl, which is kind of a really weird storyline in retrospect, looking back at this movie from today's standpoint. That's all creepy. But the funniest part of the movie, Dave, where I literally laughed my balls off, and I got really no laughs out of the movie with the exception of this one. So at the end of the movie, the Chris Penn character, who has now moved in with Eric Stoltz, and he's living in an apartment complex, and he's throwing this crazy, out-of-control party. I mean, it's really, literally out of fucking control. People are drinking and drugging and all kinds of madness happening. And what they do is they need more room because there's too many people in the apartment. So all these guys get together and break down the wall to the next apartment in order to extend the room for the party. So they do this like these football guys, and it's the stereotypical 80s, like, studly, muscular guys who bang their heads together and they start fucking, you know, taking the wall down. They take the wall down and the party starts pouring into the next apartment. Dave, this one scene made me laugh so much. Not so much what I just described, but when the people start pouring into the apartment, who comes out of the crowd but Ron Wood from the Rolling Stones, who with his black feathered hair, smoking a cigarette, he stumbles to the fridge, pulls out a turkey, and starts eating it. It was so funny and random. I just thought it was the funniest fucking thing, because, like, obviously I'm a Stones fan, but it was just like to see Ron Wood, who was such a zany guy, you know, he's like a nutty little guy. He was so out of place. What the fuck is Ron Wood doing at this party? But it was just hysterical, absolutely. And they called him in the movie the Refrigerator Raider. But he did it. I guess he was friends with Cameron Crowe and did a special guest appearance. I mean, it was just funny. Also, kind of like his body language, like the way he sort of like stumbled in. It was just really hysterical. So, wrapping up the wildlife, there's some really cool stuff here, like the Good Enough Jam, Top Down, All Fired Up, Donut City. Those are the real best tracks. You can check them out on YouTube. They're really, really good. You know, looking back at it, it's kind of an interesting picture into the time of what was going on in Ed's life. You could tell he was trying something out and going in a direction where his career might have gone had the whole Van Halen thing not started up again with Sammy Hagar. So you never know. They might have ended the band and maybe he would have gone and done this, because those other guys that I mentioned, like Rick Wakeman and Stuart Copeland, they ended up doing a lot of film scores and stuff like that past that. And Jimmy Page doing Death Wish 2. A lot of rock guys were doing those scores, and that was a lot of avenues after their bands have ended. And maybe they, you know, go into something more quieter in their lives. But obviously, Eddie was bound to take the stage, to start up Van Halen again, have more hits, go back to the top of the charts. So we're glad that he did all that with Sam. But it's just a really interesting time period, because this is smack in the middle of the Roth time and the Sammy time. Even though he was still in the band with Roth, you can tell he was very much sort of waning in the middle there. You know what I mean? So what do you think, Dave?
I think he was covering his bases. He's like, you know, maybe I'll do this. I don't know. I got Val asking me to stay home.
Right.
Dave's a pain in the butt. I mean, ultimately, he decided on the band because Alex still needed to work.
Right.
And he was very loyal to his brother and the band, too. He really didn't want the band to break up. And so thus they got Sam. But I think this was just something else to see if he could do it, something new, a different challenge. And, you know, he gave it a shot. It's not for everybody, but, you know, Ed was He's an interesting guy, and he pulled it off. And when he wanted to do something, he did it.
That's right. And I think this is definitely something to seek out. If you really want to be a completist, go check out that CD Japan and pick that up. The bootleg is just called the Wildlife Soundtrack. Like I said, you're missing a few pieces. There's a couple other smidgy pieces in the movie, maybe 2 or 3. They're just so short, it's not even worth talking about them. But they're similar to the ones we talked about. These are the absolute 99% of them. You know, it's just shocking to me. It is absolutely shocking that this is not out, but I don't think it's going to be. So I really don't think anybody's going to take the time and mix this down. I mean, people don't want to release the stuff that's in the vault that's really quality.
Right. Again, I don't know why you're so shocked, because this is not on the top of the pile of stuff to be released. No,
that's true. That's true. Well, this one's for you, Brandon Wall. I know Brandon was begging for the Wildlife Soundtrack, so there you go for Ed's birthday. Ed was going to be 68 years old. We wish he was here, but either way, we have his music, so we can always continue to celebrate Ed.
Whoa! How about that for rock video music fans? Live all day, all night. You know what you need only right here on Dave TV.
Check us out on Facebook at Dave and Dave Unchained, a Van Halen podcast, on Twitter at DD Unchained, on Instagram at DD Unchained Podcast, and you can email us at ddunchainedpodcast@gmail.com.
Hello.
Hey, how are ya?
Good, how are you?
Good. What's going on? Everything all right?
Yeah, everything's good. Living the dream.
Living the dream. Love is in the air. Every time I turn around. All right, I'm glad things are going well.
Yes, thank you.
That's good to hear it.